Hi, everyone. Welcome to the final day of the Biodesign Challenge Summit. I'm Dan Grushkin, BDC's. Wow, I messed that up. I'm Dan Grushkin. I'm BDC's Executive Director.
I'm Veena Vijaykumar, BDC's Program Director.
I'm Alex. I'm BDC's Partnerships Director.
And I'm Jess. I'm BDC's Program Associate.
So today is the day. Over the last week, we've seen student projects from all over the world. Yesterday, the judges spent 2.5 hours deliberating over which teams will win our grand prize. I would like to extend our immense gratitude to everyone in our community. First off, I need to thank the sponsors, Ginkgo Bioworks, Science Sandbox, National Endowment for the Arts, Google, Siegel Family Endowment, Pangaya, IndieBio, and our very own Tomtex. A big thank you to our judges. It's always an honor to work with them. Every year, I think we, the team, learn a lot from how they deliberate and the kinds of questions that they ask the students. And then finally, a big thank you to Argus HD. Behind the scenes, Jeff, Mark, and Tim are working tirelessly to make sure that this broadcast functions on a technical level. So thank you, all of you behind the scenes.
We'd also like to thank our mentors, artists, designers, scientists, and so many more who took the time out of their schedule to visit classrooms during the semester and to help the students realize their projects. This year, we had over 50 mentors working in BDC classrooms around the world, many of whom accepted our invitations without hesitation. We appreciate their willingness and their graciousness to support the students. Last but not least, we want to give props and thanks to our students and instructors all over the world. This is the 7th year of BDC, and we continue to be awed and inspired by all of you. You make this competition as special as it is year after year, and we're so proud of you. So BDC team, let's take one moment just to give all of these rock stars a round of applause. Take it away.
Well done.
Now on to logistics and what to expect for today. Yesterday, the judges had to make some very difficult decisions, but alas, they have made decisions. Over the next hour and a half, we'll be airing the top 6 videos for this year, which we're going to announce in just a minute. These will then be followed by our speakers, starting at 12:30, Jennifer Willett, Ani Liu, and Sunanda Sharma. These talks will be followed by our awards ceremony, where we'll announce the winner of the glass microbe, our sponsored prizes, and some of the outstanding prizes. First, we are going to announce the winners of the sponsored prizes. Dan.
Okay. The winner of the Science Sandbox Prize. This morning. The winner of the Science Sandbox Prize for Public Engagement is Order of the Biodesign, Parsons School of Design. Congratulations, students.
Yay! Congrats, Parsons.
And the winner of the Ginkgo Prize for Biological Futures is, dramatic pause, Post-anthropocentric vending machines in Japan, Keio University. Congratulations, team.
Yay!
Yes.
All right, let's air the videos.
See you soon.
Welcome to the Order of the Biodivine.
I'm Jess.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Oscar from the Parsons School of Design.
The Order of the Biodivine is a speculative, immersive, theater, and educational experience that explores the intersections of religion, science, and interspecies symbioses in an increasingly climate-insecure world. Set in a coming-of-age ritual in 2070, this project uses performance, mycelium artifacts, and a choose-your-own-adventure style structure to encourage a new perspective on our relationship with biodiversity, genetic modification, and the natural world.
We envision this project as a 30-minute immersive theater experience for audiences over 12, followed by an educational exhibit. The event is designed to travel. It will be ticketed, and proceeds will go to local community science education. Today, we are presenting a theatrical trailer for the project.
Humanity, humility, clarity. Humanity, humility, Clarity. This summer, you're invited to a mycelium melodrama, a speculative spectacle, a soon-to-be nature cult classic. The year is 2070. Life as we know it is gone. After years of political division, warfare, and natural disasters, the global north has ceased to exist. Simultaneous climate catastrophes in what is colloquially called the Big Shift have destroyed local and national infrastructure, governments, and economies. Billions of people, plants, and animals have died. But a few have made it through. Settling in what is now known as Old Rochester, this group of Big Shift veterans have survived by banding together in a theocratic community that uses genetic engineering to meet their basic needs. They value biodiversity and prioritize living symbiotically as their way of answering for past human activity. They are a community of equals. But one stands above the rest. Meet Sophie Washington, genius biochemist, charismatic leader, and self-appointed oracle of the Order of the Biodivine.
You and I know that we are not alone here. We are never alone. We are just one of so many interconnected entities in the spaces we inhabit. One small part of a bigger network of thousands of beings, all living and changing and grasping for life the same way we are. The natural world is richer, more complex, stranger than I could ever imagine. The more I study these plants and soils and mycelium structures, the more I feel like I don't understand the nuances of their communities, the wider and more complex our network seems to be. But I do know this: we are no more important than the earthworm in the soil or the pigeon in the sky. We need to take everyone's needs into account. We must live symbiotically.
She's a 90-year-old who's lived and lost, and she is determined to keep humans from making the same mistakes again. She's found a way to genetically engineer a new path forward, one she administers during an annual coming-of-age ritual for teens of a certain age.
As your divine oracle and leader of this sacred order, I now invite you to begin your humbling ceremony. Please rise. In this bowl is an ego remedy, a special genetic enhancement biogel that I created that allows us to sync with the mycelium networks. Once this gel is applied to your skin, you'll live in greater symbiosis with fungal networks around us. Some of them will start to live on you. You'll trade nutrients with them and electrochemically connect with them too. We use this biotechnology to plug our consciousness into our ecosystem, to haptically connect to root systems and get information about incoming climate events, infestations, and disease before those disasters hit our community. This biogel allows us to better understand how we can live together and atone for past mistakes. It will soon allow you to do the same.
Meet JM. This is his year to come of age. He's been preparing for this initiation his whole life, but now that he sees the ceremony up close, he's not so sure about Sophie's plans.
It's not the pain. I'm not worried about being in pain. I'm worried about being a hypocrite.
Humans don't easily lay down their bodies when other creatures might benefit from their suffering. They don't easily give up that seat at the top of the heap. They need to be humbled, reminded of their place as a part of nature and equal to others.
What makes you think these organisms want us around now? Did you ask the mycelium before you just plugged into it and started electrochemically interacting with it? You're playing God.
This is the only way forward. I do know that we have to do what we can to work with others to repair what we've damaged. And that starts with communicating with them so that we can better understand their needs. We have to take others' needs into account.
That's exactly what I plan to do. I'm going to sacrifice my body for the benefit of the fungi.
Looks like we're not the only ones who want to vote.
Join us for an immersive choose-your-own-adventure performance that will probe the relationship between humans and the natural environment. Sophie and JM will make a choice. So will you. Since we are working over Zoom today, we built out a digital experience that echoes the choose your own adventure structure of the play. If you would like to choose your own ending today, please visit our website at orderofthebiodivine.com. You can also find more information about our project there. We designed the Order of the Biodivine to be transportable, easily set up in different environments like science museums, outdoor tents, and unused structures to reach audiences wherever they are. The sets will be created with a combination of production mapping and natural plant life to evoke a post-climate apocalypse atmosphere.
When they arrive at the performance, audiences will be invited to gather in an immersive space designed to appear as a laboratory turned ritual space, set in a post-climate apocalypse world. Over a 30-minute period, they will see our comedic, educational story unfold.
At the end of the play, as it is currently designed, audiences will choose to join Sophie's cult or die honorably with JM. They make their votes known by standing with JM or by remaining seated. Those who remain seated receive Sophie's biogel on their skin and experience the atmosphere around them changing. The sounds of mycelium communicating begin to surround them, symbolically representing their newly developed interconnectedness. Those that stand with JM move to a separate room, where they see the future they were most interested in pursuing, an immersive video of plant life growing without human interference.
When the production ends, all audiences funnel into a third room with an educational exhibit that allows them to explore the themes investigated in the performance, including climate change, genetic engineering, and mycorrhizal networks, among others.
To ensure that the performance speaks accurately about the current scientific discoveries and their potential ramifications in 2070, we interviewed experts, read scientific articles and books about the topics, themes, and conflicts at the heart of our characters' world.
We also conducted a series of futuring exercises to explore potential outcomes and ensure our fictional world was rooted in today's realities. From there, we created a series of fictional timelines, narratives, and mycelium-based prototypes.
Though we are proud of our project so far, work still remains. We plan to revisit the script, writing in more characters, and creating more opportunity for audience participation. Our current team is limited to specific backgrounds and perspectives, and we plan to expand our collaboration to include more diverse points of view, including exhibit and theater professionals.
Ultimately, we hope that we can use the comedy of the Order of the Biodivine to engage the public and expand educational opportunities around complex scientific topics. We've outlined a few of them here.
Thank you.
Once you step foot into Japan, you'll realize that you won't be able to walk down the street without coming across at least one vending machine. At slightly over 5 million nationwide, Japan has the highest density of vending machines in the world. According to the Japan Vending Machine Manufacturers Association, there's about one vending machine for every 23 people. Japanese vending machines sell all types of soft drinks, coffee, tea, cigarettes, candy, soup, and even sake and beer. While these machines provide incredible convenience and fun, we can't neglect the fact that the amount of plastic waste generated from vending machines is extreme, contributing to the salient marine pollution problem in Japan. Further, these machines run at 24/7, using 7 to 14 kilowatt hours a day, even when no one is around. With the concept of the post-anthropocentric vending machines in Japan, we tried to encapsulate the idea of reshaping a contemporary Japanese phenomenon into a future bioplatform. The envisioned concept explores the near and predictable future of essential consumption in Japan and the speculative story of surviving one era and transitioning into the next. Our initial vision for a vending machine as a contemporary bioplatform heavily relies on food fermentation for bioenergy production. Long before the existence of modern packed drinks and snacks, people in Japan used to make fermented food and beverages that were served for daily consumption. We investigated how different dominant crops in Japan, like rice and soybeans, are fermented in order to propose a self-sustained system that can produce natto, amazake, sake, and other fermented food and beverages. To support our concept, we also explored the bioelectrochemical process of microbial fuel cells as a green technology that can produce electricity by using the electrons derived from biochemical reactions catalyzed by bacteria. Hako 25 is a vending machine system that consists of two different fermentation containers. One is used for soybean fermentation, and the other is used for rice fermentation. The fermentation containers are connected with the production containers, where the finished product is stored. From production containers, the finished product is dispensed into a consumption container. From the upper portion of the fermentation container, there are separate chambers into which the biogas is released, and from there, another pair of pipes extracts the biogas into the microbial fuel cells. Then, using turbines, the biogas would produce electrical energy that can be used to empower a single functional process, such as temperature control of the fermentation and production containers. Speculating the further development of the vending machine as a bioplatform in the next 5 years, we propose a system that could be fully self-sustained. We would try to expand the production of bioenergy with the implementation of additional microbial fuel cells that will use rainwater and mix it with excess fermented waste, compost, and soil to create the necessary mud. With the biorecalibration of the vending machine and the biotechnological advancements in the very near future, we could achieve this goal of a self-sustaining system and proceed with our next objective based on the multi-species narrative. In this world that is naturally and technologically intertwined, Hako 25 is long since separated from human-centered production, serving as an energy source for diverse living beings. We can already imagine a different form of nourishment and transaction, where the human takes the role of a resource rather than just a consumer. Hako 25 in the 22nd century is an interactive symbiotic organism that is a constant collaboration between species, ecosystems, and technologies. We envision the vending machine as a decentralized matrix of self-functional lab-like systems. Extracting energy from plant roots and mycelium to support itself, the system is also enveloped with a tangible membrane that collects human sweat through touch. Afterward, the healthy microbes from the sweat are separated and combined with microorganisms that initiate plant growth to fabricate a nourishing product in the form of a jelly. The jelly, which will be consumed through touch and skin by both humans and animals, will initiate the growth of edible plant-based body extensions that can be consumed and further be used by birds and insects as a temporary habitat. If we are able to realize the production of the vending machine based on fermentation, supported by bioenergy, this project can become an incredible opportunity to use citizen science methodologies and establish participatory research with the local communities in Japan. We can engage the elderly and local communities that have experience with soybeans and rice fermentation and directly include them in the process of research and production of the machine to keep the local culture alive. We will also include local farmers that will be the main providers of the crops. Humanity now exists in a new phase where we must move away from the idea of nature as something to be dominated and exploited, and reconfigure how we work with nature. The proposal for a post-anthropocentric vending machine is not an aggressive, fear-based answer to the environmental issues, but rather a vision for a steady process of transparent evolution that will create a new kind of empathy for all species.
All right. Love watching those videos. Jess, are you ready to announce the top 6?
Yes, let's do it.
All right. I feel like I should a drum roll. All right. The top 6 teams are Power Mutualism, Tongji University.
Mosquitoes and Lemons from California College of the Arts.
CACO, Universidad del Desarrollo.
Slimevolt from School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
A hairy issue, Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences.
And Musco from Universidad de los Andes.
Woo! Congrats, teams. We're going to play all those videos right now. And our first one is going to be Tongji University. Please roll it.
Welcome to Power Mutualism, a wearable power generation material based on cyanobacteria biophotovoltaics. We can hardly live without electricity, but we've been causing great harm to nature by the way we access energy. Burning fossil fuels is still the dominant form of electricity generation today, emitting large amounts of greenhouse gases and toxic substances. Transmitting power across the grid produces huge invisible waste, and silicon-based cells are hard to degrade. Even a small bottom battery can pollute 600 tons of water, equivalent to the amount of the water a person drinks in a lifetime. So I wondered, how can electricity be redesigned to be greener, lighter, and more flexible? This set of photos was taken in Shandong province of China. Due to global warming, algae blooms frequently broke out all over the world. People regard it as a harmful phenomenon, but I would see it as Mother Nature is trying to save herself. Algae takes carbon dioxide as nutrients and produce oxygen. So when greenhouse gases increase, it gets the best conditions to grow and follow natural mechanism to produce oxygen for our planet. Among the many species of algae, cyanobacteria, the pioneer organism that triggered great oxidation event on Earth 2.4 billion years ago, intrigued me. It was found that cyanobacteria not only produce oxygen in photosynthesis, but also release an electron for every photon absorbed. They are like good actors on the wrong set. What if we take it from the beach or the dump to a more appropriate place? What if we treat them not as a biological trash, but as an abundant material for generating electricity? With a design background, I started an interdisciplinary research in an environmental science lab, learning how to grow and harvest cyanobacteria. In order to form the structure of biophotovoltaic BPV, I prepared an anode using multi-wall carbon nanotubes as a conductive medium to export electrons, a cathode using platinum-plated carbon fabrics that catalyzes redox reactions, and a salt bridge using hydrogel that locks water molecules in a minimal volume and facilitates ion exchange between the cathode and the anodes. I first fabricated a cyanobacterial BPV with complete structure to verify its feasibility. But the hard material and complex components make it difficult to realize flexible applications. So I tried to simplify it to a sandwich structure. I've got a thin, flexible BPV material which can produce about 0.4 volts in the size of an Oreo cookie. I then began to think about where it would be best applied. I think the design of electricity should meet the evolutionary demand of electrical appliances. From public electrical appliances like telephone booths in the past to personal mobile devices like iPhone in the present, electrical appliances are becoming smaller and lighter, getting rid of the wires. We can easily imagine a near future with a network of wearable sensor products. However, current batteries have the disadvantages of relying on external power sources, requiring regular recharging, being rigid and heavy, which limit the user's free activities. While cyanobacteria BPV materials act like mobile power plants and have the potential to promote the development of small wearable devices. So, I further designed a wearable BPV material. When the material experiment was transferred from the lab to the human body environment, an energy balance was achieved. Water, sodium chloride, glucose, etc. in bodily fluids can provide nutrients for cyanobacteria, while cyanobacteria generates electricity, which can be captured by the BPV material. In addition, human sweat helps build the soil bridge for ion exchange, driving the operation of the BPV. And after a material absorption test, I chose and used moisture management fabrics to facilitate molecule transport, because its special structure can naturally induce a continuous high-speed flow without any additional pumps. By screen printing, sewing, and connecting the cells in series, I made a prototype and tested it in the gym. When sweat soaked the bag, the BPV material containing live cyanobacteria lit up a LED. Finally, we designed a computational framework based on human sweat mapping and Voronoi diagram for generating the pattern of battery packs, so the energy efficiency can be optimized and better applied in different wearers and scenarios. It is a product endowed with a collaborative effort between biological and digital mechanisms, between nature and human beings. It can harvest energy from human sweat, carbon dioxide, and sunlight, and generate electricity through cyanobacteria's photosynthesis and respiration to power small wearables. So we named it Power Mutualism. Compared to the current centralized low-entropy energy with high power and high order, power mutualism contributes to a kind of distributed high-entropy energy with low power, high quantity, and high mobility. We hope it can help to promote the wearable sensor network in future city. It is also a green technology that makes good use of so-called biological waste, cyanobacteria, and neglected resources, human sweat. Each wearer contributes to negative emissions rather than just zero emissions. Thank you.
All right, and our next video is going to be Mosquitoes and Lemons from California College of the Arts.
If Darwin were alive today, the insect world would delight and astound him with its impressive verification of his theories of the survival of the fittest. Under the stress of intensive chemical spraying, the weaker members of the insect populations are being weeded out. Now, in many areas and among many species, only the strong and fit remain to defy our efforts to control them. This was an excerpt from Richard Carson's revolutionary book, Silent Spring. Carson and her breathless fight against the environmental destruction caused by DDT, one of the most popular pesticides that emerged after World War II, forever changed how we thought about the use of chemicals as controlling agents against insects. In her paper called Our Oldest Enemy, Tanvi Dutta-Gupta, biological scientist from Stanford, mentions that DDT embodied the victory of the West over America's enemies, and over insects and mosquitoes in particular. She also discussed that California has had a complicated history with mosquitoes. Malaria came to California early by hitchhiking on European settlers. It killed gold rush miners and devastated the local indigenous people. The history of mosquito nets, on the other hand, goes back to the old times, but nowadays they are mainly made out of plastics. Mosquito nets that are designed for protection against malaria are often treated with synthetic insecticides that are harmful to the environment. These chemically treated nets are 50% more effective than untreated ones, and their protection is 70% greater compared to no net at all. The fine mesh of these plastic nets are also used in the illegal bycatch of the fish in our oceans. It's been studied that these nets allow for extracting the smallest fish from the aquatic environments, which causes enormous problems in the food chain balance. In addition, the insecticides also kill the fish. In places like Nigeria, contraction of malaria still remains a fatal issue, and the distribution of these nets remains complicated and manipulated by the socio-economic factors. With the rise of the temperature due to the climate change, insect control will be the second most challenging issue that we have to face following population growth. And we are clearly still at war with mosquitoes. They trigger our insect to survive, but the chemicals we use against them have made them immune, poisoning our environment and ourselves in the process. What if we could replace the industrial plastic manufacturing of the mosquito nets with the local production of biomaterials, reusing food that goes to waste and replacing the synthetic insecticides with natural ones, all in one net? Research has shown that citrus peel contains organic chemicals that are able to repel adult mosquitoes. The compound D-limonene is found in citrus peel and lemon essential oil. This organic compound is a natural mosquito repellent. In addition, lemon scent has shown an ability to repel mosquitoes. Based on the evidence that mosquitoes dislike lemons, I decided to choose lemon waste as the starting point for biomaterial development. During the process, I dissected lemons in many different ways to familiarize myself with their anatomy and their physical properties. I also used their peel, zest, and pith in many experiments to make bioplastics and to test their resistance against mold. In my next step, I developed methods to make net patterns out of my most successful biomaterial samples. I made threads, connected them with knots, used weaving techniques, and played with liquid expansion on the surface. I remelted the failed materials and mixed them with new ones to create different colors. In this process, I discovered materials with new qualities such as stickiness, which seemed the proper physical quality for the mosquito net. The natural next step was making molds and dies to achieve precise and repeatable results. I 3D printed and CNC cut molds for casting, 3D printed dies that would punch holes into the semi-dried material, and overlaid 3D generated patterns to examine the moire effect. This stage of the project was the most challenging and resulted in many failures due to the desired thinness of the material, its rapid setting rate, and the small mesh count. I kept trying different punching methods using needles, nails, and straws, and finally an array of skinny straws made the most successful and promising sheet of material. This is the very beginning, and I can't wait to push this vision further by collaborating closely with engineers, chemists, and manufacturing experts to achieve a mesh count suitable for the protection against mosquitoes. I propose casting and punch pressing as manufacturing processes at this stage, but 3D printing and filament could be other viable additive process in future, substituting the material removal. During the process, I also realized that it's possible to develop a new bioplastic recipe using entirely lemon parts. Lemons already contain all the elements of a starch-based bioplastic recipe. Lemon peel will provide pectin, glycerin will be made from lemon oil, and lemon juice will act as the acidic component. Lastly, D-limonene will be embedded in the material as a mosquito repellent agent. With this purist approach, I want to argue that the replacement of plastics with bioplastics should not justify the excess use or extraction of other bio-based materials such as agar-agar. The material experimentation and development was an incredibly exciting process, and I learned so much from every step, mostly from my failures. Now, let's zoom back and take a close look at the synthesis of my resolution. The closed circular system starts with lemon-based bioplastics. This has two advantages: lower carbon emission compared to production of plastics, and removal of synthetic insecticides, replacing them with natural ones. Next, niche patterns for the mosquito nets are created inspired by the shape of the mosquito wings, insect herbivory on lemon leaves, and the inner pulp structures of a lemon. In the next phase, I propose to make an outdoor tent with this textile, because tents are symbols of nomadic life and their origins goes back to the beginning of humankind. Historically, tent making has a strong relationship to the socio-economic factors of each region. As Philip Drew mentions in his book, New Tent Architecture, tents are ephemeral, mobile, flexible, sensual, and feminine. They can also be a solution to the rise of human need for mobility and survival due to climate change. At the end of the life cycle, the mosquito net is cut in pieces and burned. This ritual burning creates smoke, which mosquitoes detest, and releases lemon scent. The lemon ash from burning will be reused as pigment to make the new nets. I chose California as the initial location to test my concept and to iterate on prototypes. But I can't wait to expand this project to other regions in the world and to work closely with communities where mosquito blood transmitted diseases are a bigger issue and where people don't have easy access to these nets. Malaria is a climate problem. Distributing these nets shouldn't be a monopoly, and manufacturing them shouldn't be an ecological burden to the ecosystems. I want to create an economic system in which people have the power to grow lemon trees and to make their own lemon-based mosquito nets on local scales. The importance of mosquitoes in the environment is often overlooked by the other natural conservation efforts, such as saving beautiful forests and exotic frogs. But mosquitoes are essential for the health of the ecosystem. They pollinate flowers, and other animals like bats, fish, and birds rely on them as food. Eradicating mosquitoes at any ecological cost isn't feasible anymore. The aesthetics and visual aspects of this mosquito net aims at acknowledging their importance and their harmony in nature. This project is a small portion of a much larger debate about speciesism. I want to argue that we as species should see ourselves as only one part of the ecosystem. We can live more intimately with nature, co-evolve with insects, and protect ourselves and all the other components of life at the same time. We have to reimagine what we call nature, how we interact with it, and how we protect it. Thank you.
CO from Universidad del Desarrollo.
El 70% de la superficie del planeta es agua, pero solo el 0,62% es apta para el consumo humano, donde este pequeño porcentaje es contaminado por diferentes industrias a través de los años. Dentro de las principales industrias que contaminan las aguas en Chile se encuentra la industria minera encabezando la lista, liderando la producción de cobre, representando un 28,5% de la producción mundial. Los residuos de sus procesos industriales son principalmente metales pesados, que contaminan las aguas subterráneas y superficiales al entrar en contacto con el suelo. Los metales pesados en bajas concentraciones resultan muy tóxicos y nocivos para la salud humana, los animales y la naturaleza. Esta es una realidad que afecta a la población de la macrorregión del norte de Chile, que abarca 6 regiones. ¿Y a qué se podría deber al final la contaminación que hay en las napas subterráneas?
Claramente por las emisiones de las empresas.
¿Y qué empresas como mayormente hay acá alrededor del Quintero?
De distintos caracteres como químicos, de refinería, termoeléctrica, entre otras, pero son un cordón industrial de aproximadamente 16 empresas.
Claro. ¿Qué podrías decir como de experiencia tuya sobre el agua que la gente se ve o que se usa, que sirve para lavar los platos?
Claro, o sea, como les decía, el agua que se consume acá en Quintero no es de acá de Quintero. Y claramente el sabor del agua no es muy bueno. Entonces generalmente la gente prefiere comprar agua de bidón y cosas así. Por lo menos en mi casa se hace de esa forma.
El agua de la llave, ¿para qué la usáis mayormente? Sí.
Claro, no para beber,
Ya.
quizás para calentar en el hervidor puede ser, o para que el agua pase por temperatura, pero para beberla no.
Ya, cuando tú para lavar los platos, para cocinar, ¿usáis
Claro.
esa agua?
Sí.
Ya.
Sí, sí.
¿Y en algún minuto se consumía la misma agua que de acá de Quintero o siempre se ha traído de otras partes?
No, creo que siempre se ha traído de otras partes. Claro, solamente, como lo decía, en zonas rurales se ve porque están con pozos y cosas así.
Ya, perfecto.
En Chile, aunque la presencia de metales pesados en las aguas dulces de estas regiones sea también por causas naturales, como la presencia de altas concentraciones de metales en los suelos, son los relaves mineros la principal fuente de contaminación de estos. Para su mala suerte, de los 740 relaves que se tienen registro en el país, 564 se encuentran distribuidos a lo largo del Norte Grande y Norte Chico. Pero no es solo la contaminación del agua lo que les preocupa, sino también la falta de ella. La mayor parte de la población rural se abastece de este recurso por medio de camiones aljibes, fuente que no certifica ni la continuidad ni calidad. Pero no todo es negro. Un grupo de estudiantes llamado CACO está desarrollando un purificador de aguas contaminadas por metales pesados, utilizando cáscaras de huevo y conchas marinas, donde éstas se conforman mayormente por carbonato de calcio. El carbonato de calcio atrae las partículas de metales pesados y las adhiere a su superficie, quedando así contenidas en él y no en el agua, y a este proceso le llamamos absorción. El carbonato de calcio que utilizan lo rescatan de las cáscaras de huevo y conchas marinas que son desechadas por las industrias y arrojadas al mar. Para la comprobación de la hipótesis, se extrajeron muestras de agua de distintas zonas de la región de Valparaíso, y los resultados de los análisis realizados dieron que los parámetros de cobre y plomo estaban alterados, donde la norma en Chile permite tener 1 miligramo por litro de cobre y estas aguas tenían 2.21 miligramos por litro, y de plomo se permite tener 0.05 miligramos por litro y estas aguas tenían 0.07 miligramos por litro. Luego de hacer este análisis inicial del agua, se le agregaron 5 gramos de carbonato de calcio activado a 200 mililitros de agua y se dejó en constante movimiento por 2 horas. Luego de la filtración del carbonato, se analizó nuevamente la presencia del cobre y el plomo en el agua y dio como resultado que se redujo un 98% de la concentración del cobre y en un 79% de la concentración del plomo. Con el purificador CACO le damos la oportunidad a miles de familias chilenas de poder acceder a un agua segura para consumo doméstico. Y no solo eso, con nuestro CACO purificador absorbente, además de entregarle agua purificada a miles de familias, rescatamos un desecho y ayudamos a miles de chilenos. El agua contaminada entra al estanque superior, donde ésta queda en movimiento durante 2 horas gracias a las aspas que éste contiene. Luego de las 2 horas, el agua pasa por un proceso de filtrado aplicando presión para hacer de este más efectivo. A medida que el agua contaminada se filtra, el agua purificada es depositada en un estanque inferior donde se almacena para su consumo. Luego de que el carbonato de calcio se haya utilizado, comienza un proceso de sorción, donde se separan los metales pesados de este mediante un proceso gaseoso y se mandan a una industria donde se someten a una serie de reacciones químicas y físicas para convertirlos en sustancias inertes. El carbonato, luego de haber pasado por este proceso, se puede volver a utilizar, pero con menor capacidad absorbente. Para este proyecto nos hemos enfocado en 2 de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible. Específicamente en el número 3, salud y bienestar, y número 6, agua limpia y saneamiento.
Our next video is Slimevolt from School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Can artists and designers working with technology collaborate with living organisms in a way that is meaningful and mutually beneficial? And can this collaboration act as an essential demonstration of how our electronic-dependent society can change the way we consume and use personal electronics like phones and computers? We formed the artist collective Slimevolt to determine exactly that. Slimevolt is an artist-led collaborative that aims to disrupt the modern technology paradigm by incorporating biological components within existing electronic systems, not simply as a means to replace computer parts, but rather to foster a new kind of caring relationship with our electronics. The current culture around our consumption of electronics is entirely unsustainable. The almost immediate obsolescence of personal devices has led to an annual accumulation of 50 million tons of e-waste alone. Rather than simply providing new biological materials to replace electronic components that in turn would become a new kind of e-waste, our collaborative decided to address the cultural problems around overconsumption itself. As a group, we created an instrument that can act as a model for creating new kinds of symbiotic relationships with our personal electronics. We chose to collaborate with the organism Physarum polycephalum, a user-friendly protoplasmic slime mold used commonly in laboratory settings. Physarum polycephalum is a dynamic and fascinating organism that's unique abilities and physical intelligence has continued to resist classification and challenge the greater scientific community's understanding of intelligence. Physarum polycephalum has the ability to solve basic mazes and has impressive pathfinding capabilities. It also is able to respond and to thrive in states where it's exposed to electrical stimuli, making it a perfect fit for our foray into biocomputing.
Originally, we were introduced into biocomputing through the work of Eduardo Miranda, the Director for Computer Music Research at the University of Plymouth, as well as the work of Andrew Adamaski, who runs the Unconventional Computing Lab at the University of West England in Bristol. Adamaski, in particular, has been researching slime mold for over 10 years, and in his text, Physarum Machines, provides us with an experiment that allows us to measure slime mold's electrical potential. In this setup, we would place conductive tape on two ends of a petri dish filled with agar. By attaching slime mold's favorite food on either end, which are rolled oats, slime mold would grow in between the two parts and create an electrical bridge. We would then measure this connection as a resistance value. We found through this experiment that as slime mold grew, its resistance would increase proportional to its growth. We then took our setup into what's known as an oscillator circuit, which takes an electrical current and turns it into a square wave. But this is plugged in. That's so cool. This is our slime sound. This design is at the core of so many early electronic synthesizers and costs only a few dollars to create. So I'm gonna do it. In our circuit, we were using a 3-volt battery, which is a size commonly seen in hearing aids, and outputs a safe voltage that should have no effect on our cultures. As a group, we were able to create over 50 plates and found no harm in the organism in any of our experiments. We were then able to create personalized setups to play with and perform with each other.
Oh, wow!
Turning slime mold cultures into an 8-step sequencer, or plugging it into an old toy and hacking how it used to sound. We then shared our progress in class critiques and got feedback from students and faculty, as well as artists and musicians around Chicago, giving us some of their best advice. Through this experimentation, we became fascinated by the care relationship that began to develop between ourselves and the organism. This began to fuel our philosophy on collaborating with living components in electronics. To begin to put these ideas to test, we narrowed our scope towards DIY electronics communities, making our practice accessible to them by designing with readily available devices and sharing our entire protocol on existing platforms, as well as on our website with instructional videos on how to get started. In our latest model, we designed a terrarium for our slime molds to live in. We've attached our analog circuit that we mentioned previously alongside with the new integration of a Raspberry Pi. This has allowed us to add in a functionality for time-lapse recording and measure in data such as temperature and other parameters to further push our care element. With an overall goal in providing an open source and customizable setup to care for and record information from slime mold. As a collective, we believe that by introducing individuals on how to care for living organisms within existing machines, that we can foster a new kind of relationship with our electronic devices that encourages collaborations with the living world.
Next up, we have A Hairy Issue by Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences.
Humankind is sort of obsessed with hair. Ever wondered why our hair grows infinitely when almost no other creature's does? Could you imagine if a sloth's fur grew like that? But its value seems to quickly fade when it leaves our head, and desire is replaced with disgust. Our mission as a group is to discover the value of hair as a material by using the unique properties it could offer. We were first inspired by human hair mats that were being used to absorb oil spills. Along with oil absorption, what other qualities are we letting go down the drain when we waste this precious resource? But first, let's detangle the ethics of using hair. It can be a controversial material, as it contains DNA and it's culturally significant. For example, Yao women in Huanglu, China, wear the hair of their ancestors as a headpiece. Their cut hair is seen as holy and a valuable gift, unlike the tons of hair most of us just discard. Can society learn to value the hair the way these women do? But why is using human hair considered so unethical when the exploitation of animals is normalized for the sake of fur or wool? The hair we create doesn't harm us, and it would be wasted anyway. We deem it important to establish a system where consent can be acquired from people by the hairdressers. Just imagine if all our biological waste could be reinvented into something we could use. What's more sustainable than self-sustainable?
This is our problem. 72 million kilograms of human hair that end up in landfills in Europe per year. Accumulating hair waste can cause environmental problems. The chemicals in our hair from our environment, products, and medications can pollute the soil and water. Burning human hair produces toxic gases. So, how can we tackle this hairy issue?
For our project, we used only waste hair, so we went straight to the source. Hairdressers in our community, fortunately, were more than willing to donate their hair clippings.
But what are the properties of this hair waste? That's the question we were curious about. We wanted to get to know hair as a material. So firstly, we needed to experiment with different techniques. We tried felting, punching, spinning, and knitting hair. When we had some materials, we could start testing the properties. And we discovered that hair can hold double its weight in oil and is comparable to the strength of steel. To make it understandable, the combined hair of one head can support the weight of 2 elephants. We then wondered, could this strength be used for reinforcing building materials? But of course, there are several hair types. So we experimented with both straight and textured hair to have a holistic understanding of the diverse qualities. We quickly found out that most of the hair waste consisted of short hair fibers, and those were harder to find applications for. But we really wanted our product to use all fiber lengths.
We then had an eye-opening interview with Alix Bizet, a designer who'd been working with human hair for the past 4 years. She especially encouraged ideas that had to do with hair-reinforced building materials. Because, unlike hair fabric, building materials have a much longer lifespan and wouldn't be thrown away into landfill just expected to biodegrade.
On top of that, all fiber lengths can be used for the making of building materials. That's what we want, so we decided to focus on the building industry. We came upon a research article with an interesting conclusion. Human hair decreases microcracking in concrete, thus increasing its strength, durability, and shock absorption. So, how about anti-microcracking shock-absorbing bricks? Well, you're maybe asking yourself, where would you need that? Well, earthquakes. Look at the Netherlands, for example, where we are from. In Groningen alone, 4 earthquakes over the past 15 years occurred with a magnitude of 3.8. So, having bricks with these properties would be a more sustainable solution. To make the clay bricks, we had to knead the hair into the material. For the cement bricks, we laid down different lengths and types of hair into a mold. Then poured a 1 part cement, 1 part water mixture over it.
Our goal is to find more sustainable alternatives for cement.
Et voila, you got some super anti-micro-cracking, shock-absorbing bricks.
But what else can we do with this raw material? We went back to the origin of hair, our head. And why is it there? As an insulator, of course. That's it. Let's try hair as an insulation material. It has the quality of keeping you warm, just like wool, which is still being used by Mongolian nomads for floor and wall insulation. We found out that the insulation currently used in the West is damaging the environment. So we decided to try hair as a sustainable alternative. You know what also helps? Hiding the hair in insulation material also eliminates the unsettling reaction people have towards it.
It feels horrible, to be honest.
Who would benefit from human hair insulation? At the industry level, waste hair insulation would bring down the cost of production and local sourcing would decrease transportation costs. Mineral wool, currently used for insulation, causes irritative symptoms as opposed to human hair. The end user profits from cheaper insulation. They wouldn't have to learn any new habits since insulation looks the same on the outside. In fact, maybe even an extra income source might arise for hairdressers or individuals who'd be willing to sell their hair waste to insulation manufacturing companies.
Someone who already makes sustainable insulation is Catherine Larson. She gave us great advice on how to conduct an insulation experiment. We measured the time it takes an ice cube to melt on top of straight hair, textured hair, wool, and a control.
Now we know that textured hair is the most efficient insulator and all hair was better than wool. This gave us a great prospect on using human hair as an insulating material. To felt the clippings together, we created a foundation of longer natural fibers for stability. We used nettle fibers, which is local to the Netherlands.
So how does it work? Well, air molecules become trapped within the felted hair. This restricts their movement and slows heat loss through convection. Hair also adapts to humidity, which is really important for insulation materials. What makes human hair insulation so great for the environment? Well, firstly, we're finding a way to use an existing waste stream, so nothing needs to be harvested, produced, or manufactured. Next, hair is replacing less ecologically friendly insulation materials like mineral wool, fiberglass, or styrofoam. And finally, good insulation is crucial for sustainable housing. Improved insulation lowers greenhouse gas emissions by decreasing the use of fossil fuels. Can you believe that in the EU, 64% of energy use from our houses is used just for heating and cooling? However, we haven't tested the long-term durability of our material. The home is where the heart is, so we need to know how long does it take to biodegrade in walls, and would its insulating properties remain constant? We did find a clue online of an old house in which a human and animal hair mixture was found within the walls. Hair scarcity might also make it difficult for our insulation material to be applied on a commercial scale. But we imagine it as just one type of bioinsulation. And since humans would create human hair for human use, supply and demand should be in balance.
Combing through our insights, we envision our building materials as a part of a circular hair recycling system. Think about it. Hair could be picked up locally, used by other companies for clothing or carpets, then reused for our insulation, and lastly, studies have shown it can be made into fertilizer, so even our food can be grown from the nutrients of our hair. So come on, join us in this hairy revolution.
All right, and our final video is Musco from Universidad de los Andes.
Did you know that according to the WWF, every week, every person in the world consumes the equivalent of one credit card in microplastics, and that we ingest these microplastics mainly through water consumption? How can we harness the great biodiversity of Colombia to tackle this silent killer? At Musco, we have the technology, the knowledge, and the passion to make coastal homes that lack access to aqueducts free of microplastics. Musco is a product that blends the millenary powers of the moss and the latest advances in biotechnology, which is designed to retain microplastics and reduce the presence of some microorganisms from household water sources. First, let's talk about moss and the páramos, a unique ecosystem found only at the highest Andes mountains in Latin America. In Colombia, the most diverse country on the planet per square kilometer, are almost 1,000 moss species registered. The greatest abundance of moss is found in the Interandean valleys, especially in the páramos. We, the Musco team, visited one of the largest páramo ecosystems in Colombia, Chingaza. There, we interviewed páramo residents, park officers, and researchers. This visit was key to understanding the function that moss, a tiny but very relevant species, performs on a fragile balance of the whole ecosystem and how communities perceive the benefits it provides. Moss plays a fundamental role in the páramo, especially Sphangum moss, a very special type of moss, since it is capable of retaining up to 40 times its weight in water and then releasing it in dry season, contributing to the regulation of the water cycle. In addition to water regulation, Sphangum moss has exceptional function capacities, as it has been demonstrated that it is capable of detecting and retaining microplastics that are floating in the water. According to environmental engineers Catherine Bolaños and Cristian Rengifo of the César Vallejo University in Peru, they found that Sphangum moss presented an efficiency of 94.63% in elimination of microplastics present in household drinking water. This is achieved thanks to the fact that its phyllidea have hyaline cells with porous membranes that retain the microplastics in their interior when water passes through them, functioning as a natural filter. Why are microplastics so problematic, and what can Musco do about it? There are a few studies. Recent evidence suggests that microplastics damage human cell walls, generate allergies, and cause death of some cells. Plastic is everywhere. It is hard to imagine modern life without it. According to a 2019 UN report, 300 million tons of plastic waste are produced annually, which is the equivalent to the weight of the entire human population. And of this, 13 million tons of plastics are dumped into the oceans every year, affecting biodiversity, the economy, and people's health. This waste eventually turns into microplastics. Microplastics are the product of the degradation of plastic waste. There are plastic particles smaller than 5 millimeters, a size so small that they are imperceptible to the human eye. They have been detected in commercial table salt, placenta, blood, and human lungs. Colombia's biodiversity is such that in the same territory there coexist two ecosystems as different as the páramo and the most beautiful beaches in the coast that connects Barranquilla, Santa Marta, and Cartagena. How can two ecosystems so distant and so different from each other be united to improve people's life quality? In Colombia, according to a study conducted by the Center of Hydraulic Research of the Technological University of Panama, the highest concentrations of microplastics are found in the Caribbean, mainly in Cartagena, Santa Marta, and Barranquilla. Austin Garcés, a researcher at the Institute of Marine and Coastal Research in Colombia, said that in the Caribbean coast, up to 8,000 microplastics per liter of water can be found filtering into water sources for human consumption. Considering also that in many of these areas of the country, the water is not 100% potable, and the majority of vulnerable communities lack access to aqueducts, it can be concluded that the Colombian coastal households are the most prone to not consuming quality water and suffer from hydrologic stress. We visited some of the coastal communities and made observations on domestic water consumption in Barranquilla and Cartagena, and found that culturally, water that comes directly from the tap is not used for drinking, as it is customary to use bottled water or to boil it to ensure its potability. The water that comes directly from the tap in coastal cities is used for cooking or washing dishes. Thus, in each plate of rice, soup, or any other preparation, plastic microparticles are filtered into organisms of Colombian coastal people. The Musco team wanted to test the presence of microplastics in coastal water and the potential of moss in retaining these microparticles by themselves. Initially, the samples underwent a series of microscopic tests to observe the presence of these particles in the water of Colombian coast. As a positive control for the presence of microplastics, we intentionally added toothpaste residues to destiled water, As a negative control, we use distilled water alone. In the first two samples, a positive result was obtained for bluish microparticles consistent with microplastics. To obtain a better measure of the effectiveness of sphagnum moss, both the positive control and the coastal water were centrifuged at 5,000 rpm for 5 minutes, obtaining the microplastic sediments to carry out the experiment with dry moss in different quantities. Finally, the Musco team proved that the moss cells have an effectiveness in capturing microplastic in water, showing a 1-to-1 effectiveness. With our experimentation process and based on the most recent academic studies, Musco was born. Musco is a filter that is composed of 6 parts. The first is the moss star, which is a porous cellulose membrane filled with 280 grams of dried sphagnum moss. Dried moss is even more powerful in retaining microplastics compared to living moss tissue. The second is the container, made of stainless steel. The third is a stainless steel helix that, together with part 4, a metallic spinner, allows the centrifugal movement that generates the separation of the water and the solids in it, in this case, microplastics. When the moss membrane comes into contact with water, it manages to absorb and capture the microplastics and allow the passage of water free of them. The fifth is the outer shell, inspired by the shape of the hyaline cells that cover the entire filter. And finally, an inclined base made of stainless steel, which allows Pascal's principle to be fulfilled by having an inclined angle allowing the water to enter at a specific pressure. Now, how does it work? Musco is connected by a hose to any pipe or water source, letting water pass directly to the filtering chamber. This is a hybrid technology in which it takes technical and bio features based on a principle of helical gravimetry. Since its helix constantly rotates on its axis, it allows water to rise with the even minimum pressure. Its constant circular motion allows the water to permeate the porous membrane of dry moss surrounding the system, generating a minimal but effective centrifugation, so that microplastic particles are adhere to this membrane. Due to the density and capacity of the filtering membrane, Musco manages to capture 80 grams of microplastic, the equivalent of 16 credit cards. 16 credit cards less in our organism every 2 months, which is the suggested time to change the membrane. Musco has a life cycle based on circular economy. Nothing is waste, we do not generate impact on sensitive ecosystems, and everything is transformed. We will implement a buy one, give one business model, in which for every filter that is bought, we will donate one filter to a vulnerable coastal household. It all starts in the buffer areas of Páramos close to Bogota, where sphagnum moss is grown in specialized nurseries that mimic the natural conditions of the páramo, so that they grow properly without the need to intervene or alter any existing ecosystem. In solar energy dehydration chambers, the moss is dried, potentiating its absorption capacity and reducing the amount of weight and therefore the energy required for its transportation. Then, the dried moss travels to our production plant in the coast, where the cellulose membrane is manufactured with the moss inside, and all the parts of the filter are assembled, packed together with 3 moss stars replacement and sent to the distribution points. Every 2 months, the moss star must be changed for a new one. We're looking for partners that are capable of utilizing these microplastic residues for other processes. Sustainable Development Goal number 6, Clean Water and Sanitation, states a universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. For the Musco team, elimination of microplastics in drinking water is a priority. With our solution, we seek to support and include the communities involved in order to improve water management and sanitation together. We are confident that our product will achieve a great decrease in the consumption of microplastics in Colombia. But we firmly believe that this product has a high scalability potential and can be applied in every part of the world. Want to have microplastics-free water? Join the Musco revolution and let the moss and the nature be the master.
Hi, all. Welcome back. Before we go on with the program, I think we need to share some deeply troubling news. The Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade this morning, allowing states to ban abortion here in the US. Our team is always tries to keep our politics out of the challenge. I think we struggled really deeply throughout the Trump administration to do so. I don't think we can today. We're incredibly disturbed by the curtailment of women's freedoms today. As the US becomes a darker, more difficult place to be, our team and our community have to redouble our work. We created BDC as a forum to discuss and debate our collective biological futures. I think today's news really continues to press upon us the importance of the discussions and the education that takes place in this forum. So as a show of defiance on this dark day and in hopes of brighter times, we're going to continue with today's program. So Jennifer's already on screen with us. Thanks for being here, Jennifer. Jennifer's our keynote speaker. This is Jennifer Willett. She is the Canada Research Chair in Art, Science, and Ecology, professor in the School of Creative Arts at the University of Windsor, and director of Incubator Arts Lab. Jennifer, I think I'm really glad that you're here with us today. You've been an inspiration for a lot of the people in this community, including myself and the staff. And I'm really glad that you're here today of all days. So I'm going to turn off my video and let you get started. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you to the Biodesign Challenge. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here. I really value the work that you do in our community, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of it. And I agree that today is a difficult day to be here, but I think it's an important day to be here as we move forward and can reconsider biopolitics as part of our biotech future. So I really honor and respect your statement on Roe versus Wade. Thank you for having me. So given that, my name is Dr. Jennifer Willett. I'm the director of Incubator Art Lab. I'm a Canada Research Chair in Art, Science, and Ecology at the University of Windsor. And I'm here today to talk to you about my practice and how that might pertain to the Biodesign Challenge. So I am an artist, but I'm also a researcher. I'm an in-between hybrid person. And I skirt a lot of boundaries, and I find that really useful and exciting as a research methodology, but it's also incredibly challenging moving through institutional spaces as someone who doesn't completely belong within any category. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about what it's like to be an artist and a researcher and really a hands-on practitioner in the hard sciences, though certainly not a scientist. So to begin, I want to say I work in a genre called bioart. Bioart's a little different than biodesign. Bioart is a contested term, much like biodesign. It's a new genre, or it's a new term to describe a genre that maybe has existed since the beginning of time. Bioart is a contested term. It's still, the definition is still being argued out in conferences and in events and in publications today. It can include genetic art, transgenic art, biotech art, vivo arts, live art, life art, ecological art, land art, eco art, and by some definitions, performance and body art. But there's a lot of conflicting opinions on these definitions. Bioart can be understood as a form of contemporary art production where the artistic media is living organisms. It can be understood as a form of contemporary art production that utilizes the tools of biological sciences. And it can also be understood as a contemporary art field that explores the parameters of life. And that would be the definition that I really am attracted to. And what that does is it allows things like performance art and ecological art to exist in the same space. But it also allows me to think into the very past. I think about early art forms. I think about Neolithic paintings of handprints on stone walls. And I think about those types of practices in the same trajectory as the practices that I engage with today. Bioart is not. These are also contested definitions. George Gessert would argue that bioart is not art that represents life, chromosomes, DNA, etc. is not bioart. Computer simulations of genetic processes, evolution, plant growth are simulations of life and not alive, hence not bioart. Now that artificial life, people might argue that the environment is artificial, but that the life is real in those environments. So there's some conflict on that one. Jens Hauser would argue that bioart is not things like chimera sculptures or DNA portraits or chromosome paintings that are no more examples of bioart than maybe Claude Monet's paintings of impressionistic paintings would be considered water lily art or cathedral art. Some people think bioart is not artificial life, is not documentation of bioart. So photographs of bioart are not necessarily bioart. Body art, food art, ecological art, by some definitions, are not bioart. But if there's one thing that I know for sure is that science is not bioart. And the methodologies and the types of knowledge produced between bioart and science, although sometimes look the same and the tools are the same and knowledge is very similar, the goals and the methodologies and the type of knowledge that is produced is not the same. From my perspective, bioart is also political. And I've always had this slide in my presentation, but I updated it today with the Roe versus Wade announcement. Because when we engage in biological artwork or biodesign, we are engaging in larger discussions of biopolitics, and we are co-defining what our shared biotech future will look like. And so no matter how you position yourself and whether or not the content of your artwork or your design work is political, just participating in this discourse is. Bioart is also, from my perspective, involved in the production of meaning surrounded evolving biotechnologies, that the technologies themselves accrue meaning over time through cultural interpretations. And Bioart is very good at creating strategies and structures and narratives by which a general public can understand and interpret biotechnologies. This is the work of Paul Venus, who is very interested in power relations within biotechnologies and creates artworks that articulate those challenges to us as viewers. Bioart intrinsically involves ethical considerations not afforded to other life forms. Now, that's a little funny. That doesn't mean there isn't ethical considerations to other life forms. It means that they are more invisible in those artworks at times. So if you look at a painting, we're not thinking about where the cadmium was mined and who put that labor in and under what circumstances were they working. But those ethical considerations are there. But with bioart, those ethical considerations are brought to the forefront, that there is an engagement, an interspecies moment where those bioethical considerations are brought to our bodies and to our minds and to our eyes. From my perspective, bioart and biodesign are very different, but there are significant overlaps. And my work as a bioartist involves an enormous amount of biodesign. So let me explain a few of those instances to you. First of all, I spend a lot of time designing new equipment and containment devices for safely exhibiting living bioartworks. And that means I'm worried about biosafety, but I'm also worried about aesthetics, like what story do those containment devices tell? What historical background do they come from? I spend a lot of time designing new type of architectural spaces. I'm particularly interested in certified laboratories that also function as creative maker spaces and as public art venues. How do we do that technically? How do we meet all of the needs of the organisms and the humans in those spaces, but also create meaning or alternative uses or create hybrid multifunctional spaces? I'm involved in designing new bioartworks that convey meaning and have purpose and reimagine the limits of what can be made, which is very similar to biodesign. I apply experience design principles to designing my art installations, community engagements, events, and workshops. And lastly, my lab, we are involved in redesigning how we practice biotechnological and bioengineering protocols to accommodate interspecies collaboration, reciprocity, and love within those methodologies. So I'll tell you, for those of you who haven't met me before or don't know anything about my lab, I'm from the University of Windsor. Windsor is a very interesting place. It's right on the border with the United States of America. It is a twin city with Detroit. This is a photograph from the end of my street. And so we are in Canadian history, that one of our prime ministers described us as a mouse sleeping next to an elephant. I'm crooked right into the armpit of the elephant. And what happens where you are affects me profoundly. I'm also living in the heart of the Great Lakes Basin. And so there is like a social political environment, but also an ecological pulls on me as an artist working within this space. I'm also on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. And living in this environment, even though I'm on the border between Canada and the US, I am deep in the heartland of these other communities that also have important political boundaries and political tensions on my environment. Windsor, like Detroit, is the heart of the auto manufacturing sector in Canada. And what that does is it creates a very interesting student base of people I work with. My students have helped their parents take cars apart on their front lawn. There is a makerly culture here. There is a hands-on knowledge that has helped me grow my bioart practice to a really significant level. It also has suffered the economic downturn that same region has in the United States. So the University of Windsor recently purchased the Armories building in downtown Windsor as part of a revitalization project attempting to transform our city. And they've built a contemporary art center inside a historical building, the Armories building. And as part of that, I negotiated to have a bioart lab built behind a glass vitrine wall in the main atrium, the main lobby of the new building. So when you walk into my building, the first thing you see is an art gallery, and the second thing you see is a bioart lab. And this laboratory is intended to be welcoming. It's like a transparent space. I teach in there, but I also conduct research in there. And it is also a performance space. It's a space where we do formal and informal performances or exhibitions of biological artworks that are not allowed to leave the lab. The space is currently being wired for theatrical lighting and sound. It will become a formal performing arts venue where we can do bioart opera, bioart performance nights, cabarets. I have a second space, and this is the Bio Incubator Art Lab studio, which is in downtown Windsor, and it's a storefront studio. I should say that the lab is a BSL level 2 environment, so it's highly regulated, and it's really hard to get people in there who are under the age of 16 or who do not have 3 days of biosafety training to enter that other space. So we created this studio, and this studio is where we can make my artworks, but it is also where we can invite members of the general public to come do BSL level 1 Bioart workshops with 5 minutes of health and safety training. So this space was allocated to me by the University of Windsor as part of my Canada Research Chair. And the research chair is focused on engaging audiences in hands-on biotech knowledge. And you can see that I've created a really elaborate storefront to sort of call people into the space. And then within the space, we have this greenhouse that we're currently working on having certified as a BSL level 1 laboratory so that we can grow high school grade projects in this environment. We've already started doing workshops since things reopened. It's very exciting. So my lab and my organization and my art practice is rooted in this one notion, and that notion is that biotechnology is a technology of love. And this idea came to me after years of working in the lab. I had these reciprocal relationships with the organisms, and I had highs and lows, and I worried about them. And I could see that even working with me sometimes enforced, it helped them grow and proliferate. And I tried to take good care of them and meet their needs, but I also sometimes killed them, sometimes on purpose and sometimes by accident. And so I really built a loving relationship there. But even more than that, I realized over the years that the human communities that I share my lab with could also be defined by a love relationship. And I don't mean romantic love, and I don't mean Hollywood love. I mean a bell hooks kind of love, where it's a durational political commitment to treat people with reciprocity and respect towards transforming the types of power dynamics within that space. So the primary objective of my Canada Research Chair in Art, Science, and Ecology is to devise research creation methods, artworks, and texts and technologies that serve to engage audiences, species, and communities in collaboratively imagining possible biotech futures. The futures that I am interested in imagining involve feminist and post-colonial perspectives, advanced digital and biotechnologies, historical, agricultural, and Indigenous knowledges, interspecies collaboration, community engagement, sustainability, love, joy, and gratitude, and the acknowledgement of suffering and even death in the lab. This work, I want to show you, stems from work that I was doing when I was a student during my undergraduate degree. I talked my way into, I convinced a professor to help me access the Human Anatomy Lab in the School of Medicine at the University of Calgary. And I spent several months going down once a week and drawing the cadavers. And there I learned a lot about anatomy, but I also learned a lot about the nature of death. And I also learned a lot about going somewhere where you don't belong, about medical practitioners, about doctors training, about the sort of like ideology that they're moving through as they're engaging into their own professional practices. And what I learned from that was the beginning. That was the moment where I clicked and I thought, this is what I want to do. So there's a few things I learned from this experience that I still hold true with me today. And I offer to all of you today as participants in the Biodesign Challenge as things to consider as you're starting on your trajectory within the field. So in my experience, artistic education and research is not always understood or valued in the same way as scientific education and research in our society. Sometimes you will have to educate those from other disciplines about what you are doing and why it is important. Sometimes it is easier and more effective just not to tell everyone exactly what you're up to. Different disciplines have different community standards. Learn the language standards of the cross-disciplinary community you want to participate in. So for example, myself, I read a lot of scientific papers, even though I'm not a scientist. I go to lab meetings of other groups and I sit quietly and listen and learn about how things are functioning in that space before I attempt to move through it. In my experience, institutions rely on a form of professionalism, including moderate dress, good communication skills, and effective paperwork skills. Now, I do not mean to tell anyone ever how to present themselves in public. I feel that we should all have the freedom to express ourselves as we wish. But as a young artist who was trying to talk her way into science labs, I found that when I stopped dyeing my hair blue, I gained more access to these privileged spaces. So in my experience, it improved my chances of moving smoothly through institutional spaces by adhering to these norms. Be respectful to people, communities, and institutions that differ from your own. You will learn a lot and make new friends and colleagues in unlikely places. It is often a good idea to go places where you think you don't belong, because you'll find out that maybe you do. So now, 20, 25 years later, I run my own lab. This is the Incubator Art Lab research team. This is a couple different years. We do photo shoots every year. One had to be on Zoom, last couple had to be on Zoom. And so flash forward 20 years, I run my own lab, and I only have paid employees, no volunteers. I hire artists, scientists, but I also hire philosophers. I hire nurses. I hire people from all different cultural and age range backgrounds to come and work in my lab. And together, we are producing the world that we want to live in, but we are also producing amazing new innovations by having all of these people working together in the shared space. This is my class. I have an undergraduate class called Bioart, Contemporary Art in the Life Sciences. And I would say half of the students are art majors, and the other half of the students come from all across campus. So they come from a variety of different disciplines. I get a lot of scientists who come in the class. And what happens is it's a very collaborative environment. And I sort of test run different art projects and workshops in that environment. And then I get their feedback and knowledge. So they're really involved in certain ways in producing some of the research that comes out of the lab. We also have a lot of fun. In that class, we do really high-tech biotech workshops, right? Like, so here's a good GMO bacteria workshop. But we also do all sorts of like low-tech, creative, fun things. So in this slide, you can see them practicing sterile techniques, sometimes better than others, working with agars on a variety of substrates and tools, learning how to cultivate seeds in the lab, and then doing a pig embryo dissection in the lab. We have an MFA program at the University of Windsor. We do not have a Bioart program, but I would say about half the students who come into our MFA program are bioartists. So if anyone here is interested in doing an MFA on this topic, Bioart or Biodesign, please come talk to me. I'm always interested in that. We do a lot of events. I love to surprise people. I like to trick them into having a Bioart moment. So I host these events like a parade or a cabaret. And then I give them a little twist at the end, something that they're not expecting. And the next thing they know, they're having a contemporary art moment, or they're engaging with a biotech organism, or they're learning about biotechnology. So this one is called Feasting the Lab. And this is when we opened my new lab. We had one night, we had a big cabaret party event, and like 500 people showed up. And we did all of the things in the lab that you're not allowed to do in a lab. And the next day we had the lab certified. So none of these things will ever happen again. We danced barefoot in the lab. We put makeup on in the lab. We did sangria shots in the lab. It was wonderful. And then we do that in collaboration with a variety of other people. So we had some artists come in. We worked with a local caterer who did amazing Bioart food. And then on the bottom left here, you'll see that we had a choir come in and serenade the lab. I thought about what would you do, like how you might feast a new home or feast a new baby. We did all of those things to FET, our new lab. I do a lot of curatorial work. This is an example of a curatorial project I did with students. This was our 5-year anniversary, and this was a show at the Ontario Science Centre. But I also curate larger international Bioart exhibitions. And then I'm also, in addition to all that stuff, all the apparatus, I'm also a bioartist, like a capital A fine arts artist who makes a lot of artwork. And some of my practice looks very traditional, and some of my practice really looks like science or biodesign or these types of things. So this is a recent exhibition called Baroque Biology, and it's intended as a feminist science fiction where biotechnology manifests as interspecies collaboration, reproduction, theater, and storytelling to reimagine our shared biotech future. And in here, you can see that I have large sculptural works that are biotech equipment that I've rebuilt from scratch, but there's also some photographic work in there. So this piece in particular is called the Great Lakes Algae Organ, and it's a Dutch street organ that plays live music, but it also is a functioning algae farm. And I ride it around the Great Lakes region and take it to art exhibitions and fairs. And people get to learn about algae and look under the microscope and do algae tasting. But then we also engage with this as an aesthetic artwork and thinking through how a lab maybe doesn't have to look so clean and sterile. In that exhibition, I also had the series Baroque Biology Paper Theater. And that's a lab-based artwork where we use GMO bacteria to be micro-performers within a paper theater environment. This project took 2 or 3 years to manifest. These are some of the first demonstrations I did in the lab to try, proof of concept. And then what I do is I work with my lab group very much the same way a scientist does. We have weekly meetings. We assign different duties based on everyone's skills. And everybody built up different areas of the project until we went into we solved all the problems and we went into production mode on this. So the first thing we did is we worked with Amino Labs kits to create a rainbow of bacteria using GMO technologies. We reverse engineered their recipe because they wouldn't sell us their agar so that we could grow it in perpetuity. Then we started casting agar and learning how to work with it as a sculptural form. We started doing little vignettes and petri dishes of how GMO bacteria could interact with these other design or collage elements, but also maybe with the bacteria that comes in on paper collage. And once we came up with strategies we were pleased with, I arranged them in the lab. And then we hired a photographer who came in and made a stat camera. And so these are photographs of the lab bench where I've arranged these collages. We photograph them and then we throw them into the bio-waste. Like many artists, I've been working a lot virtually the last couple of years. So we've been hosting virtual performance and engagement events through both spaces. I have a lot of alter egos, in particular the gentleman scientist character, who often works as a ringmaster, an ironic ringmaster in these events. We hosted a virtual opening for our new studio space where we ran up and down the street and introduced ourselves to all of our new neighbors and explained to them what Bioart was. It was very befuddling. And then most recently, I did a performance for the Global Community Bio Summit. And that was a performance live from the lab during the height of the pandemic. And so what I did is I negotiated with my dean that they would allow me access to the building, even though the university was entirely closed. And I crept in there in the middle of the night. It was like a zombie apocalypse movie. I was really scared about who would be in there. And I brought with me a couple of organisms because we killed all of the organisms in our lab. I did bring some of the algae home with me and kept it in my, front office. So I brought some organisms. I brought tomatoes from my garden and I brought some zooplankton that I bought at a pet store. And I came in and I did this performance called Gratitude Offering to the Organisms. And it was like a meditation on all of the other organisms that we share our labs with and the gratitude that we may have for them. And maybe also a meditation on reimagining our interspecies relationship with those organisms, as well as across other life forms, given that we're now engaged in this new pandemic relationship with the COVID-19. So it became a performance, a reutilization of this space to rethink our relationship to an organism or a parasite that we were trying to manage. So overall, I'm here as a bioartist, but who also engages extensively in biodesign to really reiterate methodologies of working through notions of love as a way to perpetuate our relationships across species with one another and in defining what our biotech future could look like and who it belongs to. And so the last thing I'd like to just touch on today is that I recently published an article through the Biodesign journal called Biotechnology is a Technology of Love. So if you have further questions or inquiry, you're more than welcome to check that out. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. And thank you for having me, Dan.
Thank you, Jennifer. Wonderful. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and the students. We're going to go right into the next two speakers, Annie Liu and Sunanda Sharma. Could you two join me on stage? Awesome. And I'm going to do a quick just reading of your bios, if that sounds great. So Annie Liu is a research-based artist whose work examines the reciprocal relationships between science and technology and their influence on human subjectivity, culture, and identity. She is passionate about integrating multidisciplinary approaches to art making and is currently an associate professor of practice at the University of Pennsylvania. Sunanda Sharma is a creative biologist and interdisciplinary scientist interested in questions of astrobiology, evolution, ecology, biodiversity, origin of life, and artificial life. She completed her PhD and master's at the MIT Media Lab as part of the Mediated Matter Group and is now a research affiliate with the MIT Space Exploration Initiative. Thank you both for joining us. Take it away. Make sure you unmute yourselves.
Thanks, Vina. Hi, Sunanda. It's such a pleasure to be speaking with you on the stage today. Like Dan, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the really awful news in the US today with abortion rights being overturned. But I also wanted to take a minute to congratulate all of the participants in the Biodesign Challenge because I had the pleasure of being one of the judges, and the range and the depth of research, the type of projects that you are doing is so incredibly inspiring. So I have hope for change to come and lots of futures that are different than the ones that we're living in today. I wanted to introduce our panel by saying that we are both designers, artists, researchers that work across a lot of disciplines. I met Sunanda first at MIT Media Lab, where in the very first impression, I was so intimidated because Sunanda is so smart and so has amazing educational pedigree and also and then you meet Sunanda, she's just the kindest, most wonderful, best hope for a collaborator you can ever have. So I just wanted to open with that. I thought maybe we could start by talking a little bit about our backgrounds for some of the audience members who might not know anything about our practice. And then I've prepared a list of questions that I tried to grab on Instagram, asking people what they want to know about our experiences with collaborating across disciplines. Would you like to start, or would you like me to start, Sunanda?
You go ahead. I like listening to you.
Okay. So hi again, my name is Annie, and I am an artist, researcher, and designer. And to give you a little bit of background, my undergraduate degree is actually in art. I studied art at Dartmouth College. It was a liberal arts education. And I love that because it forced me to take classes in spaces that I was very uncomfortable with. I have to say that I grew up at a time where people, even teachers, would still say things like girls are not good at math or girls are not good at science. And somehow I really internalized that and became really intimidated by certain subjects. But I think in a way, by being forced by my liberal arts education to take a really wide variety of disciplines, I learned that, actually, I can learn these things, and especially through the lens of art, by having a certain kind of desire for a project, I would then almost like naturally learn certain things. And then I went on to architecture school, actually, because I came from a relatively low income family, and I couldn't imagine what it could be as a career path to be an artist. It seemed so impossible and mysterious. So I studied architecture, which I really love. It introduced me to digital fabrication. And also it caused me to think about the context of making outside of the thing itself. So for instance, when you're an architect and you design a hospital, for instance, you learn a lot about the physical building, the HVAC systems, the electric systems in the building, the user interface in terms of like the materiality that might help someone heal or feel comfortable. But you also have to learn about the governmental context in which this hospital is situated, in the historical context as well. So it caused me to situate all of my projects in a larger scheme, really taught me to think critically. And then I had the pleasure of also having a master's of science from the Media Lab at MIT, where I met Sunanda, and I studied with Sputniko there in a lab called Design Fiction. And I think that's where I really doubled down on learning more about how to think critically through design. So all of our projects there are through, actually, it happened so that while I was there, all of our projects were within the domain of biodesign. And I would say a main focus of my group was in feminist technoscience. So thinking a lot about biopolitics. Actually, my thesis project was about bodily control. My very last year at the Media Lab was when there was an election where we elected Donald Trump in the US. And he infamously said this phrase, grab them by the pussy. And there were a lot of protests in which protesters were wearing or holding signs saying the pussy grabs back. And I happened to be in a class with David Kong called Grow Almost Anything at the time. And I was learning about something called galvanotaxis, where the researchers at Stanford were engineering paramecium to swim directionally with electric fields. And I was wondering, does this work with sperm, and what does it mean for a woman to control sperm, given the entire history of men controlling the reproductive systems of women in biopolitical regimes? And so the piece is called Mind Controlled Sperm. You're welcome to look it up online. And yes, and I'm sorry if my brain is really scattered today. There's just a lot of emotional processing to do in this kind of political context. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me and the journey that I took to get here. Sunanda, do you want to talk a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah. So thanks for having me. First of all, this is so exciting because I think I've thought a lot about biodesign, and I always feel like I'm learning as I listen to new projects. And when I was looking at the projects that people are presenting, and when I was helping out at Mass Art this year as sort of an expert scientist and talking to different students, I was just struck by how much hope there is there. And I think it's really profound, and how much awareness there is to think outside a particular prescribed way. And I find that really promising. So it's a pleasure to be here. And it's a pleasure to be here with Annie, because we are actually friends that we met years ago, and being together is wonderful, even today. So yeah, I took a similarly winding path through a lot of different fields. And someone told me something very similar to Annie, that I was failing out of all my classes at MIT for like the first 3 years I was there. And they were like, oh, well, you should, talk to different people about this, talk to deans, talk to mental health, things like that. And someone told me, well, some people's brain just doesn't work that way, that you can do coding and math. And I was like, well, that's unfortunate. Sounds like I'm one of those people. And then another dean, just one person out of so many, actually had something useful to say, which she said, hey, maybe you're not good at tests, but you're great at projects. Sounds like you really like research. Just do that more. So as soon as I switched to that, my grades went from like alphabet soup of C's, D's, and F's going all the way up to A's and B's, because it turns out just doing research in a really unstructured way that's where my passion is. As a kid, I wanted to be a poet and a naturalist, and I liked finding organisms, and my mom was really upset at me for bringing them home, but I'd always bring them back out, but still she was upset at me. And I ended up getting an undergraduate degree in biology at MIT, and I worked for almost all the years that I was there in a neuroscience and neurotechnology lab looking at optogenetics, so turning on and off brain circuits and understanding fear and memory circuitry, like spatial memory formation. So that was my first great experience of what it's like to be in a lab. And then I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And through a random email chain and some chance meetings, I ended up meeting Neri Oxman at the Media Lab and starting at the master's program there. And I went from being surrounded by biologists, physicists, and neuroengineers to being the only biologist in a group that had all architects and designers and a couple mechanical engineers. And this was a huge shift in community, but also in perspective for me. And to use Jennifer's word, this is when I became a hybrid person, officially, at least. So that was a huge change in terms of language, in terms of currency in a way, and in terms of just what outputs or goals are desired for the projects that we're doing. And communication was really hard for me to get people to understand sort of my side of what was happening, because I felt very intimidated the other way by all the designers, that everybody just knows all these references and they can talk about this one exhibition that happened this one time in the Serpentine Pavilion this one time and just all know about this. I'm so behind. And someone gave me the advice of just look at stuff that you like and try to think of why you like it, what it makes you think of, what the context of when it was built, and just start there from that very genuine place. And that was really good advice that I come back to all the time. And I continued with my PhD in the same department, and I tried to continue weaving this sort of path. And I'll just note this, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in the questions, but this question of what's rigorous and what is accepted as a hard science or technical work, I think is something that I've always tried to think about and challenge, because the number of people who told me that I was throwing away all my potential as a scientist by moving more into design was very high. That I was going into fluffy work and I wouldn't be able to do anything. And so being in biodesign it feels to me like defiance, and I use that anger a lot, I think, in my work, because I think science is very rigid in a lot of ways, and it doesn't need to be. And being in this group of all these other people who are thinking different ways allowed me to question, why do we culture E. coli at 37 degrees? Yeah, it's optimal for the rate of growth, but like, who said that? And why are we all passing that down? And if they are actually changing, like this lab strain is still changing over many, many, many years, should we still be doing that? And also, what are we optimizing for? If it's for us to have ease of culturing, why? Should it be something else? Should we optimize for diversity? Should we optimize for organism comfort? Can you do that with microbiology? What are the bounds of empathy between us and microorganisms, which also make up us? So there's a lot of different things in there that I tried to engage with. And a space that I like to do that was this biodesign lab that we built. So I co-designed and built this during my master's back in 2015, 2016. So it's a BSL2 lab that's in the Media Lab now. And it's a place where we did pretty hardcore microbiology, but we also had a lot of art and design that was happening there. Like we had an artist do a performance in there one time, and we also created a lot of biohybrid objects that eventually got exhibited at different museums. So some of my work or most of my master's and PhD work was at MoMA in 2020 as part of Mary's exhibition, and more recently just wrapped up at the Nature X Humanity show that was at SF MoMA earlier this year. And so I had the exhibition thing, and then also a first author paper in a scientific journal presented at academic conferences. And my committee was Neri, who's an architect, designer, and many other things, inventor as well. Another inventor and computer scientist and electrical engineer. And then my undergrad advisor, who's a neurotechnologist and neuroengineer. So that was a really big mix for me. And I ended up also getting excited about extreme environments. So I got to lead a project that was aboard the ISS, the International Space Station, for 30 days. And now I'm an astrobiologist officially, and I'm still in love with design. So a lot of other stuff happened on the way, but that's the brief overview.
Amazing. I hope everyone out there is swooning like I am. I actually had a whole bunch of other questions, but I wanted to start by maybe expanding on something that you said. How wonderful that you met a dean that was like, maybe you're more of a project-based person than an exam-based person. And I wanted to bring that out because sometimes when we do our projects, there are tricky technical things to learn and to, I don't want to say overcome, but sometimes there are hurdles in creating a project. And when I talk to my own students, sometimes they'll say like, I'm not a coding person, or I'm not a very math-based thinker. And I always like to give the analogy of like, maybe it's just that in traditional math curriculums, they try to teach everything as if you are a square peg, but really you're a triangle. And like, you're just trying to find the shape that fits in your knowledge puzzle. And so I always try to present information in a variety of formats. So maybe you're a visual thinker, or maybe you're a verbal thinker, or maybe you're a symbolic thinker. And let's try to communicate the same thing in many different ways. And I feel like the work of biodesign and bioart inherently does that, because you have to be kind of like a multi-language speaker in a way. And I was wondering if you might expand on some of your experiences with that, especially if you are, I don't know if I'm overusing this analogy, if you say work and think in triangles, but you're collaborating with someone who works and thinks in circles, for instance. Like, do you have an example or memories of that kind of translation process?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I think this is something I struggled with so much when I started at the Media Lab, because I would say stuff like, we would have this conversation, which was just like, the designers would say, what can the biology do on this project? Like, it's going to be a thing that you put on top of the design and then it just comes on top. And I'd be like, well, what can design do? And our answer for both was just anything, right? And that wasn't really productive. So the better thing to do ended up being, as you're saying, diversifying in terms of how we were presenting our work. So I didn't appreciate at all the power of visually explaining work, not with graphs and plots necessarily, but also just showing what it is, almost doing like portraits of organisms I work with. So I really love microscopy. Like that was my first love in lab. And that was the way that I started being like, all right, this is E. coli. This is what it looks like when it's has all the nutrients it needs. This is what it looks like when it's stressed. This is B. subtilis, same sort of thing. This is human cells. And speaking that way, and now I like put it everywhere. You can see my background, some radial area. And I think that everybody could interpret images in the way that they wanted to. And so it came from this place of like excitement rather than I'm trying to get to a productive outcome immediately. So I think making some space to then start to throw around language that isn't even precise, but that explains how you're feeling and what you're seeing was way more productive. Mm-hmm. And I know like when you're talking about your projects, you talk a lot about like the art and the motivation, but then you also throw in words like galvanotaxis. And, like, you have that same sort of polyglot nature, I think, and you get it over time, but I think it's really hard to do without, I don't think you can do it without feeling stupid. And I think I felt stupid so often, and that's been great.
Yeah, actually, maybe to go on that, it helped a lot for me to always have the beginner's mindset. And I know it's very cheesy, but in spaces like Harvard and MIT, there is such pressure, I think, to live up to a certain myth of what other people in those universities have achieved, or like the word genius gets tossed around a lot, and imposter syndrome. But it helped me to just shed all of those pressures and just pretend like I was in a kindergarten and just be like, hey, I'm playing with blocks and that person is playing with clay and I want to go over there and learn a little bit about the clay. So what are some like really basic entry level ways that we might play together? It's funny, maybe I'm thinking about this a lot because I have young children, and it's funny because I'm often there's a Reddit subreddit called Explain It to Me Like I'm 5, and I'm literally always actually explain it to you like actually my children are even younger than that, so I'm always explaining it to her like she's 2, which she is. And I find that it helps so much because especially like my background is in design, and there's a lot of design theory and lots of philosophy that uses really long, fancy words. And you'll reference people like Heidegger or Foucault, and a lot of times, a lot of the other people in the room might not know what you're talking about. And why not just say it out in plain language instead of all of these big words? So I think there's that too. I think it's tough because in both academia and fine arts, there is a lot of posturing, and I think it probably comes from a place of insecurity. And so I try to live out what I preach, which is like to stay really humble, to explain it like you're 5, and to like go back to these really basic tenets of being a good human in a way, like being someone who's just trying to, yeah,
I always felt like the anger for me was always with this gatekeeping.
Yeah.
Enough to like go into this lab and go do the project that you want to do. And what is enough? Do we want to continue the legacy of gatekeeping for science? Because it sounds to me like for generations, we've missed incredible ideas and incredible chances for exploration because we've been gatekeeping people who don't look like they should fit in or who don't have the right words to express what they're thinking. And of course, like, I think people try to use things like safety in some ways, or like almost tradition, which we say as protocol or citable protocol or things like that in science, without actually thinking why that's the case. And I think pushing that has always been really important. And that's why I appreciate I think, as you're saying, like being really grateful and humble with people who are able to push that. And that's what I felt that I had in a lot of the interactions at the Media Lab, especially with designers and artists, like push that thing and figure out why we even think that way.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at our list to try to make sure we hit a lot of these questions. The first two questions were actually, how do you meet collaborators? And how do you define a successful collaboration? Maybe those are hand in hand. In terms of where to meet collaborators, I have stayed for a large part of my life in academia, and that has been a really rich playground. I mean, academia has its problems for sure, but it's been a really wonderful space for me to try to meet people across really wide ranges of disciplines that I might not have normally encountered on the street. Yeah. And then the other way that I meet collaborators is by writing grants. There's, like, for instance, a really great, I don't want to call it a competition, but it's called the BAD Awards, Biological Art and Design Awards, and it's based in the Netherlands. And in that scenario, artists, designers, and scientists apply to get paired together. So you meet people who are inherently motivated to work with you.
Yeah, I think maybe I haven't been quite as formal, maybe, or no, parts of that with academia, because I've been in academia for a while. And when I graduated with my PhD in March 2020, and nobody.
Congrats. Yay! Amazing.
Sad. And it really made me start thinking, like, oh, how do I have collaborations if I'm not in academia anymore? How do I do that? And so I just basically spent a bunch of time, like, I eventually started my own little, like, one-person consulting thing and asked everybody, like, hey, do you want to talk about 3D printing and cells? I got you. Let's do it. Or like, do you want me to build a lab in my basement so I can test out your microscopes? I'm happy to do that. And so that was really exciting. And I met a lot of people in that way, just by like reaching out by email, kind of, or having people connect me to other people. So every person in the network from academia, asking them to tap shoulders and see where to go. But I also just spent a lot of time cold emailing. Like, I read people's papers and I said, hey, you're a professor here. I read your paper. I thought it was cool. Can I talk to you about this? This is where I think our work could overlap. And I thought that would lead me to a postdoc doing science, doing astrobiology. What actually led me to that year was doing an artist in residence. So this was a really weird changing of hats for me, because I was so used to being the scientist with a bunch of artists and designers around, and us working together in that way, but having to be like sort of the science expert. In this case, I was the artist in a lab of everybody who focuses on fungal biotechnology. And I did a project on can we have empathy for microorganisms, and focused on one particular type of black fungus in the lab of Vera Meyer, who's a professor at TU Berlin. And that was just incredibly fruitful, like just joyous to work together. There was so much joy and happiness I always felt, and I was so inspired working with her and the people in her group, and also being able to give myself room to think in a different way and to push myself, like, okay, I went to technically the School of Architecture. Let me think about this. Let me try to hold myself to this standard. And so, like, I think being really bold about just reaching out to a bunch of people was the way to go, and then being open to the potential ways you could work together. And I've even met people randomly who, like, were bioprospecting for an organism, and we met on LinkedIn or something like that. So a lot of different ways.
That's awesome. Yeah, I totally forgot about that. I also totally cold email sometimes after reading. Actually, sometimes if I read a paper I really like, I just email the person as a fan. I feel like, you know, pop stars might get lots of fan mail, but I feel like scientists don't get enough fan mail. So I try to acknowledge when I really love something.
Yeah. And then in terms of like a successful collaboration, what do you think? What have been successful collaborations for you?
You know, that's such an open-ended question, because sometimes I struggle to define what a successful project is for me, like just stemming from this. But I think for me, successful collaborations are ones that open more doors, where I get something in me sparks, and like one project leads to 10 more ideas in my studio, or I learn so much more, or something about the way I view the world. There's a paradigm shift. And I think that's true for the researchers too, because, for instance, maybe to give a concrete example, I had the fortune of winning the Biological Art and Design Awards in the Netherlands in 2017, I think, or 18. And I worked with researchers from I worked with radiologists, and I asked really strange range of questions. And I remember over and over again, they would say, I'd never thought of that. That's like 10 more research projects in our lab that could be launched. And or we, being mindful about respecting the equipment and not breaking it, of course, but there were a lot of like, we never thought to use the MRI in this way. And what are some of the new potential applications that could come out of it? So I think that there are moments of great synergy. Also, I think just making a really good friend is huge success for me, because I don't know, like the world can be really dark and lonely, and finding wonderful people who bring light into your life is a huge delight and joy. So yeah, what about for you?
I think, success is a hard thing to quantify. Like there's the things that I could initially think about of like, we published it, woo, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the things that felt most exciting in terms of collaboration was when we go past the superficial level and we get to this like deeper one. Like we're speaking the same language, maybe not with the same words, but we're definitely on the same page. And I think often there's a moment of surprise that comes with it. So a project that I'm thinking of is I worked with a bunch of other folks in the Mediated Matter group when I was doing my PhD, and we were making these new types of death masks, essentially. And so we broke a lot of 3D printers doing it, but we were engineering organisms, bacteria basically, to interact with chemicals that could be released from a 3D printed surface, and looking at what that looks like on the human face. What does that look like in the scale of the human body? And what does it mean in the context of the traditional death mask, which used to preserve people's likenesses, but now we have many more biotechnologies across different scales. What does this mean in terms of how we can represent humanity, humans after life, and maybe beyond death? What does that mean? And what was interesting is we used a really, really simple assay, so a type of experiment basically, and we just used bacteria that are engineered in a way that you literally learn in like a lab class during undergrad, and we did essentially a type of blue-white screen, and it was very basic. And so the people we were working with are synthetic biologists, and they were at the MIT Synthetic Biology Center, and they're like, oh, how'd you do this? And we were telling them, well, we just expanded the blue-white screen basically to different colors. And they're like, wow, I didn't even know that. I couldn't have recognized that. And these people, like me, had been trained to work with that. But there was this big moment of surprise of like, okay, it's in a different context. It's with this death mask thing. It's on a 3D printed surface. It's interacting with the surface and sort of building little chemical microenvironments that the bacteria are working with. This is a different thing. It's what I was familiar with, but in a different way. So it has this element of surprise. And I feel like that made it feel very fruitful, because we were able to take something so known from another person's field and twist it in a way that it could be applied somewhere else. And so that was really, really interesting.
I love that. Actually, it bridges into another question I had that I struggle with in my own practice. So maybe it's an open-ended question, but I wonder what it means for you to collaborate with another species. Because I think in a lot of bioart and biodesign traditionally, perhaps even when the collaboration appears to, or is called a collaboration, sometimes it's a one-way human exploiting the other species type of relationship. And I struggle with this because I think I'm guilty of this too. And these days, without having an answer myself, I think a lot about what does it mean to really care for the organism, or to really have a symbiotic relationship. It makes me think of, and maybe I am saying this artist's name wrong. I think her name is J. Rim Lee. It's a piece that I saw a long time ago. I think she did it for her master's project at ACT at MIT, the Art, Culture, and Technology program, where she changed her own diet to make her urine more nutritious for a plant garden that she was building. And so it like really blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, usually we modify the plant to be more tasty for us, but she's trying to modify herself to be more beneficial to the plant. And I love this. I keep thinking about it. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this type of interspecies collaboration?
Yeah, the longer I'm in this field, the more I think about the terminology that we use, also because of work from my amazing collaborators and colleagues, sort of pushing what does that mean, interspecies collaboration? And it comes to, I think, the question of agency as well. Like, how can you recognize agency in another species? And I've tried to think about that going all the way down to the micro scale. Like, there's mammalian sort of stuff that you can sort of see, like this organism is, you can tell if a mouse is anxious and you can tell if it's relatively calm, for instance. But can you do that for a bacterium? Is that even the right terminology? Like, calm? Because they wouldn't have the same range of potential states, maybe. So I think, like, I don't really have an answer. It's more that now I'm questioning all the terminology. Like, I think people a lot of times in biology, like, be like, oh, my cells are happy because they're growing really well in a way that's useful for me in my experiments. They're growing really fast and efficiently. And just like that terminology, happy, never sat right with me. Or like, my cells are so sad, they're all dying, or something like that. I'm like, okay, how can we, like, do we need different words? Do we need to apply a whole new set of terminology for this? But I think one thing that I found that was actionable, aside from changing language or questioning language or putting in caveats as I'm presenting things, was to bring this question of discomfort for the viewer, for the human. How we were doing one project where we were working with a bunch of insects and we wanted to put them into a museum setting. And I was like, okay, well, the best thing for this insect is to be at like 30 degrees Celsius and 85% humidity. So can we do that in the museum? And I mean, you can guess the response from the museum was like, no. Like, well, then why are we considering bringing them in there if we're not going to do something that makes them the most comfortable, that's most similar to their native habitat? Because maybe we shouldn't be doing that. So if we can't make viewers and ourselves uncomfortable for the sake of collaboration with another organism, then we really need to question, is that a true collaboration? Is there equality there, if that's even possible? So I think there's so much to dig in there.
Yeah, no, those are such great insights. I like to think about it too in this way, like, maybe it's not about me. Maybe we call it disobedient, but actually it's just like, different ways of being in the world. And so going back to maybe the topic of biocontrol, I think that one of the things that, and sorry to make this sound like it's closing remarks, but I think we only have 1 more minute.
Yeah, it's okay.
I think that one of the things that makes it so uplifting to me, the Biodesign Challenge, is by its nature, it is very collaborative. I see lots of students working across lots of disciplines in large groups. And I think about how important it is to be able to work together, especially in intense times like this, to think about what it means to, I don't know, let go of notions of controlling others in order to maintain a semblance of, oh man, my brain. It's like going off too many tracks. I keep thinking too much about the abortion rights in the US, but I guess I just wanted to say that I think that interdisciplinary thinking is more important than ever now, because I think that so many of the things that surround us have so many dimensions to it.
Yeah. And I think respect really underlies a lot of that. The interdisciplinary collaboration is only ever founded on respect and not being territorial and not having a huge ego about what you're doing and trying to break down preconceptions. And that respect, I think, should know no bounds.
I love that. Thank you. That's a beautiful note to close on.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you and being here.
Yes. And now we will turn it back to Vina.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. So many beautiful small golden nuggets of advice in there for the students as well. I appreciate you both for joining us. We're going to actually go into a break now. Just before we start the award ceremony, we're going to do about a 15-minute break where we are showing ad reels, as we have been throughout the summit this week, that features videos from people in our community, artists, designers, past BDC alumni, and more. So we hope you stick around, and we'll be back shortly for the award ceremony. Thank you, everyone.
When I was a kid, I was super curious about the world around me. Though I didn't know it, I was already doing science by just asking questions. It wasn't until BioBus that I was able to apply my passion for science. The first time I looked into a microscope was like peering into another world. You could see every single one of the details. Thinking about that gives me chills. Growing up in the Bronx, I wasn't really able to get into a lab.
But these two have like latched onto each other.
Being a junior scientist, I teach the students how to go about using the microscope.
Whole little ecosystem going on.
In a day at BioBus, we would collect samples from the garden
Oh my god, this one.
and then let students observe the species under the microscope. BioBus is a mobile lab that's bringing research and lab assistance to underrepresented communities all around New York. BioBus started when one scientist bought a bus off of Craigslist, and now, more than 10 years later, we have this unique and amazing community that educates others on science and makes it very, very fun. In our project, we're located on the Baylander, which is basically the boat version of the BioBus. That's where we do all our research and collect all our samples. We're doing a project on the effects of water quality on eel prey. We're identifying these organisms by using field guides to find out what exactly is in our water. My BioBus mentors, they're a big part of why I decided to pursue neuroscience.
So each one of those is a lens.
I'm a junior scientist because BioBus has been so influential in my life, and I want to be able to one day be a role model. There's a little scientist inside of everybody.
Hi there. Welcome to the SBA Bioart Lab, where we've been designing the future of food for over 30 years. Good. This laboratory, the first of its kind, is where biologists and artists work together tackling some of the world's biggest biological concerns. Over the years, we've spawned some unique results, but nothing as successful, impactful, and delicious as this. Meet the Mayo tomato, the amazing protein-packed fruit that started it all. A biological breakthrough that changed the way we think about protein. I have something amazing to show you. Randy, get the thing.
As you wish.
Before the Mayo tomato, humans relied heavily on animals for their daily source of protein. With a growing global population and a strained agricultural system, we recognized animal protein was not an ecologically sustainable source. There had to be an alternative method. We put together some of the brightest scientific and artistic minds we could find and the result was impressive. Take a look.
This only hurt a little bit. JK.
In 2016, the Bioart team at the School of Visual Arts engineered the world's first fruit to produce the same protein, myoglobin, found in animals, the myotomato. They found plants to be deficient in megadoses of protein necessary for a nutritional human diet. So they translated a DNA sequence found in beef and inserted it into a tomato's genome. The result? One little tomato possessed the same amount of protein found in an 8-ounce steak. This breakthrough creation caused quite the stir. It seems not everyone was a fan of this amazing scientific achievement.
GMOs are dumb and stupid and poison!
Of course we're not happy. However, in the year 2030, mad cow disease almost completely wiped out the cattle industry, creating an urgent need for the myotomato's amazing protein power. And soon, hearts, minds, and mouths were open. The myotomato ushered in a global movement that ultimately ended our need for animal consumption. Not bad for a group of art students, if you ask me.
The life of a bioengineer. It might sound like it's all glamorous coats and self-rotating stools, but it's hard. People always think I'm up to no good, as if I'm like cloning a team of superhumans to work under me.
What? Why don't they ever talk about our life-saving vaccines?
Right? It's like there's this elephant in the room. But I'm not a mad scientist. I'm not even a scientist. Under this coat, I'm actually a programmer. I came to Ginkgo to code the greatest technology ever. Not this simple robot. This greatest technology. We have so much to learn before our innovations are this advanced. What if eco-friendly homes could sprout from seeds? What if we could grow anything? Picture cell phones and tablets with self-healing glass? That doesn't exist yet. Well, maybe we get on that. So pause work on sustainable agriculture? I mean, we don't even have to choose. With the same tech, we're making everything from cancer therapeutics to a yeast that produces cannabis. What I'm saying is, synthetic biology is so much more than you think. Take this beaker. You hear DNA designer, you probably think this is toxic sludge. That is toxic sludge. What? We're studying it to design bacteria that cleans polluted waterways? Exactly my point. So next time you hear bioengineer, imagine a team of coders, biologists, engineers, artists, who also happen to love dinosaurs. Come envision the future of synthetic biology.
Before any of us, our friends, or our families existed, our home was covered in trees that helped deliver clean air, water, soil, and habitat for nearly everything alive. While they certainly weren't perfect, the forest brought harmony. They made us possible. And yet, in recent times, they've never been in more danger than they are now. Between 2000 and 2010, enough trees to cover the entire state of Mississippi were lost each year to make room for new ranches and satisfy demand for materials. The root causes of deforestation include the demand for commodities, bad practices, and government complicity. This issue threatens to deprive almost a quarter of humans from their home. This is particularly important given the vulnerability of indigenous communities, and that indigenous lands are home to roughly 80% of Earth's biodiversity. As a result, deforestation of forest land is the leading cause of extinction on the planet. This also releases large amounts of greenhouse gas at a critical time of climate change. Despite how unsustainable current economic activities are, the demand for solid wood products alone could grow by as much as 61% by 2060.
That is part of the reason that designers, carpenters, and manufacturers who regularly build products with wood deserve more attention. If deforestation destroys their large supply of lumber, it will open the door for cheaper but toxic alternatives to fill this void in the market, most of which are non-recyclable, non-biodegradable, and improperly disposed of. To combat the issue of deforestation and to bridge the gap for designers, Symmetry has created an alternative form of wood. By embracing a balance between nature and design, we are using bacteria to produce cellulose, the main component of wood and the most abundant organic polymer on Earth. The formula for Symmetry was uniquely curated by Enactus member Gabe Tavas and was awarded a finalist spot for the Technology Entrepreneur Center's Innovation Prize. Let's break this process down. Wood consists of mainly two chemicals, cellulose and lignin. Cellulose is a sugar commonly found in food waste, which provides most of the solid support in the material, while lignin acts as a glue. Symmetry has formed a partnership with The Plant, a community of small businesses demonstrating the benefits of creating a circular economy for local food systems. Kombucha, a small business within it, has provided Symmetry with over 280 pounds of bacterial cellulose waste. Our production process begins in our biomaking space, with blending the bacterial cellulose so it reaches a nearly liquefied state. We pour the blended cellulose into a molding container that fits our desired shape and size of the alternative wood. Next, we heat water and add agar, which acts as a binder in the formula. When bubbles appear in the mixture, we remove it from heat and pour the hot agar water into the cellulose mold. We properly stir the mixture until the material reaches a smoothed out surface. Next, the material is placed in a dehydrator for a few days, while alternative wood begins to solidify and harden. Lastly, the alternative wood is pressed to ensure consistent thickness and a smooth finish for designers to utilize. And that is how you make wood without cutting down trees. The Symmetry team continues to experiment various formulas based on encouraging feedback from woodworkers in the Urbana-Champaign area who have expressed interest in incorporating this material into their work. So far, they have produced 74 samples, experimented with 7 unique ingredients, and 21 samples have met quality control. They've also made different colors of wood to mimic a variety of tree species, cut the wood on power tools like a lathe, and even laser-etched artwork alongside community members of the university. All of this was done without cutting down any trees or using a drop of petroleum. Innovation always starts with inspiration. So where did the inspiration for Symmetry come from? Symmetry project manager Gabe Tabas shared about his passion for biodesign and how the ideation for Symmetry came about.
My first experience with biodesign really started when I actually went to the 2019 competition for the Biodesign Challenge. So I was actually in New York City and got to meet students that were working on biodesign stuff. It was insanely cool, inspiring. They were really pushing limits. And I thought, why not bring that back to U of I and start something there myself? So here we are now with Symmetry. With a project like this that can get complex, you have to go through so many different versions and different formulas. I was really going to as many advisors as I could in labs and maker spaces to get some insights on where to start. So it was like trial and error, just sheer experimentation really. So that was how I got started in the beginning with Symmetry.
Key in the success of our project is utilizing a group of passionate students who each push forward the project goals through their unique skill sets. So let's meet the team.
My name is Kanika and I'm working on the materials research, testing the properties and functionalities of the wood.
Hi, my name is Hannah and I run the strategic media efforts for Symmetry.
Hi, my name is Eddie and I work on market research and customer discovery.
Hi, my name is Jared. I assist in customer discovery and lead web design.
Hi, I'm Angela and I co-lead materials research, the manufacturing process, and environmental analysis for our product.
Hi, I'm Gabe Tavis and I'm the project manager, founder, and the formula inventor for Symmetry. I've been working on this project for several years and have been doing really as much as I can across all aspects of the project to maximize our impact in fighting deforestation.
What we have found is that symmetry thrives as we prioritize teamwork and collaboration. Through our diverse backgrounds, we each have a hand in shaping a more sustainable Earth. Through symmetry, we have all become biodesigners. Together, we are in the process of sending more wood samples to designers for feedback, testing the material's physical properties in the lab, and measuring and comparing its carbon footprint. With all that momentum, Symmetry aims to build a world where designers don't have to choose between their goals and environmental sustainability. They can do both at the same time. This project fights for a world where humanity can express its creativity while also living in harmony with the environment that everyone depends on. We are pushing towards a world where forests can thrive again.
Welcome back, everyone. Before we present this year's prizes, we have a super special announcement to make. I'd like to introduce our partners for the 2022 Biodesign Sprint. And those partners are from Mars. Welcome both. I'm thrilled to have Dandina Bradley, Global Vice President who runs the Wellbeing Center of Expertise, and Arthi Gopal, Senior Director of Health and Wellbeing Strategy and Innovation. The two are working together to drive systemic change or strategic change within Mars. And it's our absolute pleasure to collaborate with two leaders bringing about the future of food in this coming autumn's Biodesign Sprint. So Dandina and Arthi are going to give a short presentation and talk a little bit about why they're working with the biodesign community. And I will pass it on to the two of you. Thank you both for being here with us. We're really, really excited to be working with you.
Thank you, Dan. I'm excited to be here. And it sounds like you guys had an amazing week. And I'm sure you're ready to kind of hear what's coming next. But just thank you for inviting us into the community. I am very much looking to see how we can think about the future. And as you see on the screen behind me, well-being is the new happy, healthy, and well. And why that's so important is this thriving capacity, right, of people and the planet. And I'm just really proud to be a part of the Mars culture. If you don't know us, feel free to Google us. We're a pet food snacking company. You may know us for our chocolate, M&Ms. You might know us for our gum, Orbit. You might know us for some of our snack products, the Kind Bar. But this is really a view of the future, and we think about our leadership in systemic change as we represent, as you can imagine, this big market that we put on trillions of dollars of money that's spent every year on well-being, and food being a big part of that. I heard some of the comments earlier about the interdisciplinary thinking and what's required. And if you look at these 8 dimensions, all of these are really essential for how we kind of take care of ourselves, which I like to say our well-being affects our well-doing. And if you go to the next slide, which really gets into kind of why you, right? Why do we want you to kind of consider this challenge with us? As you guys are the first generation of biodesigners, right? I want you to be thinking about the future of food and our well-being. And I noticed that some of the BDC alumni have represented ideas for the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. And our kind of stakeholders, if you will, as we think about the future of food, is these areas of what we call impact, right? So those 5 areas on the left really come out of the United Nations thinking with, their stakeholder partners like the World Health Organization, and empowering future stewards, which is you, right? Nourishing for happiness, which is so vital to our quality of life. The systemic change, you move one kind of dial on one side, you're going to affect the other parts of the system, and how those are interrelated are so critical. How we make sure we're in that net positive cycle, as well as just really thinking about lasting shifts, right, in our dietary habits. And so we had taken an opportunity to kind of dissect that across those parts of the human experience, right, that really help us thrive. And we're really, really excited about what's at these intersections and what this next horizon of meaningful societal impact means. But more importantly, we really want your thinking and the way you think about systems as biologists and designers and thinking about the future to come join us. I couldn't be more excited that the participating schools in this session represent the world, right? Amsterdam, the US, Japan. And I'm going to hand it off to Arthi, but just want to say thank you in advance for considering this and join us, because we really do need your kind of future thoughts of how the world should be and really creating a better future of food and our well-being. So I'll hand it off to Arthi to kind of share more about the design challenge.
Yeah, thank you, Dondina. Excited to meet all of you virtually. Hopefully one day we can do this in person. But as Dan mentioned, we are proud to be sponsoring this year's Biodesign Sprint Challenge. Kudos to the Living Sponge team, right? When we think about this challenge, this image just sparked and inspired us. We're really, as Dondina shared, we're deeply thinking through, what does the future of food look like? What does community well-being, individual well-being look like? And how do we play a role within that? And when I see an image like this, you're just like, oh, how do we do something different? These are big problems to solve that require different thinking. It's different than what we know. And we know we need to get out and connect with more people to really think about, how do we have meaningful impact? How do we start to think in generations? I love that phrase, Dondina, you just shared, where it's like the first generation of biodesigners. We think in generations as a private company, and I just am so excited to have all of you engaging with us as we think through, what does it look like to unlock this sustainable future of an experiential snacking ecosystem. We tend to refer to leaders and thought leaders in this space as our future stewards. They're really the ones guiding us forward. So just so whenever you hear that term, know it's our passion, it's our commitment to thought leadership and inspiration, and really equipping everyone to be part of the conversation and part of the solution. What I wanted to share was, you'll get a full you'll learn more about the design brief as well as the application process. So look for that later this summer. I believe it's opening up towards the end of July, early August. But what I wanted to share is why we're really excited to be partnering with this community. It's about really unleashing all of the great passion and commitment that we have within this community to really think through these meaningful problems and ultimately inspire ideas, inspire us to think differently, to really see the world in a different way as we partner together to really solve for that future. And then finally, I think it's about seeding impact. We talk about meaningful societal impact every day, but that requires all of us partnering together and really being connected and present in the conversation. And so this is a first step, I think, to our longer term partnership and commitment to engaging all of you. So just as you're coming into the challenge, just know that we're super excited. We're super proud to be sponsoring this year's challenge. It is the inaugural effort and hopefully the first of many to come. So with that, Dan, I will turn it back to you.
Dondina, Arthi, I just want to say thank you again. Dondina joined our board a little bit more than a year ago. I think I have that right. It feels like you've been with us since the beginning, which is kind of amazing and wonderful. Arthi and I have been speaking weekly, I think now for 6 months, and it's always a pleasure. I feel like we have a pattern going already, which is really fun. And I'm just super excited that we're going to be working with Mars and the two of you to really think about the future of food as we head into October. Can't wait. Thank you both for doing this with us.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the actual prize portion of this. Thank you again. So we've been waiting for the year. Arthi, would you mind just turning your video off? We're gonna jump into, well, I have Grace up here. We're gonna jump into the Ginkgo Prize for Biological Futures. Grace, I don't even know what to say. Wow. Grace joins us as a designer who's been working with Ginkgo for quite some time. She's been working with the BDC team to come up with the prize language and judge and mentor some of the teams as they've gone through the process. So Grace, I'm going to hand over the mic to you to actually announce the winner. Go ahead.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so excited to be presenting this award today. So just get right to it. So at Ginkgo, we believe that imagination has a huge role in making change happen. And that's why we sponsored the Ginkgo Prize for Biological Futures, which is awarded to a team that imagines a biological design alongside a future that it inhabits. Envision a world that is overcoming the challenges of climate change, environmental degradation, and inequality. What designs exist in that world, and how do they incorporate synthetic biology? I'm really excited to announce that the winner of the Ginkgo Prize this year is Keio University for their project Post-anthropocentric vending machines in Japan. They reimagined a more sustainable vending machine where microbes are used to produce fermented foods and power, and we were so impressed by their storytelling, visuals, and vision. It's certainly a future that we would like to see. So congrats to the Keio team.
Congratulations, Keio team. Congratulations, all the participants. It was a fantastic set of projects this year, and I know the competition was super tight. Thank you, Grace, for announcing. We're going to now move on. I'm going to call John Tracy to join us. Hi, John.
Hey. Thanks for having me.
So John's going to actually introduce the winner of the Science Sandbox Prize for Public Engagement. John is a program director, or the program director of Science Sandbox, an initiative of the Simons Foundation, and has been supporting BDC for quite some time and has been a champion for the type of work that we do, and we're always grateful. But let's talk about the team. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to you, Dan, and to the team. Congratulations on another amazing and inspiring summit. It's, given the state of things right now, it's nice to see that the future seems to be in pretty decent hands. So Science Sandbox, as Dan mentioned, I'm the program director, and we're sort of driven by this idea that science is part of culture. And that ethos leads us to support programming that engages everyone with the process of science. And I think what we love about this program so much is that, the BDC team really understands that the future of science, technology, what have you, and biotechnology is certainly a part of that, has to be democratic. It has to be for everyone and with input from everyone. And that involves, to ensure that's possible, that involves public engagement in a real way. So that was the kind of idea behind establishing this prize, and some really amazing programs have come out of it and come through. This year was absolutely no different. The programs were really amazing, which really fits with, they seem to improve every year. Yeah, and I'm on that note, I'm super happy to present this year's winner from Parsons. It's the Order of the Biodivine, which is a speculative, immersive theater experience that explores the intersections of religion, science, and interspecies symbiosis in a climate insecure world. In other words, it's kind of like, imagine like Sleep No More meets science and technology. It's really innovative and super, super impressive work. So congratulations to them and to our finalists this year as well.
Thank you, John. Congratulations, Parsons team. I'm going to call up Vina to introduce the Outstanding Instructor Award. Come on up, Vina.
Thanks, Dan. I will actually invite all of the BDC team up just so we can have some camaraderie as we clap for the students who are winning now and the instructor. So up next, we have the Outstanding Instructor. Each year, I have the absolute pleasure to work alongside incredible instructors from around the world, coming from diverse backgrounds and walks of life. Our instructors are truly a pillar of the Biodesign Challenge in this community. So this year, like every year, we put it to the students to nominate their instructors of the ones who they thought went above and beyond in their classrooms. And we received some beautiful stories. Our team got to sit down together and read some of these wonderful anecdotes. So here's an excerpt from one of the letters that we received this year for this year's winner. This instructor supported us throughout the whole program. She facilitated engaging workshops with her fellow instructors, created safe spaces for us to explore, and checked in on our well-being outside of the classroom setting. She introduced us to the world of biodesign by opening up the doors of biology to us young designers. The winner of our Outstanding Instructor Prize is Sam Edens from Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences.
Congratulations, Sam.
That's Sam.
Awesome.
Okay. Great. Yes. And it's my pleasure to announce the winner of the Community Choice Prize. This year, we had 3,847 votes from the BDC community. Of those, the team that received the most votes is the Design Village for their project Sex Ed. Congratulations to the Design Village. We look forward to seeing where you take this project.
Congrats all.
Yeah.
All right, and we're going to move into some of our outstanding prizes. And each of these prizes are actually going to be presented by some of our judges from this year. So it's my honor to bring up Leslie Atzman, who will be announcing the Outstanding Presentation Prize for 2022. Leslie is a professor of graphic design and design history at Eastern Michigan University. Leslie, please turn on your camera and when you're ready, announce the prize.
Yeah, the Outstanding Presentation Prize is awarded to the team that communicates the implications of their projects in a clear and compelling way. As a visual communication designer, I'm very aware of how important presentation is to getting across critical information. How do you get people to be engaged with issues that don't necessarily affect their day-to-day lives? How do you make kids aware of concerns that'll affect their future? I'm pleased to announce that this year the prize goes to Izmir University of Economics team for their project BioBalloons. The BioBalloons team prototyped balloons from biomaterials as a biodegradable alternative to commercial balloons. The team chose balloons for their project specifically to engage children. And their presentation includes recipes for the biomaterials they explored so that people can make their own balloons. This is a great way to engage people in sustainable balloons and also to encourage the next generation of citizen scientists. Congratulations, BioBalloons team.
Congratulations, BioBalloons. Thank you, Leslie. Okay, we're going to move on to field research. I'd like to bring up materials researcher and curator at the British Council, Zoe Powell-Best. Zoe.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Just arrived back in London from Birmingham, and it's so lovely to be with you all. I'm actually really happy to present this award. I think it really touched my heart, both kind of intrinsically and culturally. So just a little bit about it. And the team really showed us what it means to explore and take that initiative to go out into the field, to interview the experts in their field. And all the teams are asked to focus on how communities can really potentially be affected by the project. So in order to find out, really how they can understand the social impact of what their project was going to do. So without any more delay, I'd like to present the Biodesign Challenge 2022 Outstanding Field Research Prize winner is la Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana for their project Tenochtitlan, which I looked up how to pronounce, in the traditional way. And just a bit about it, it's a 3D printed ceramic sculpture within a communal urban garden where the forms of the ancestral knowledge can be passed down and practiced. And we really saw that in your presentation, and this importance of cultural knowledge and sharing, is very close to my heart. So felicidades, team members Mario Castro Rosas and Dante Arellano Barron. And also to your instructors as well, Sergio Davila and Marco Ferusca, from the Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana. And I really found that your university tagline, which is Casa Abierta al Tiempo, actually means forward-thinking university. And so this really felt like this forward-thinking, even though you were looking back at the ancestral, history and knowledge, it actually felt very much so that you were looking forward at what you can do with this knowledge. So felicidades.
Congrats. Yes. Thank you, Zoe. We're now going to announce the Outstanding Science Prize. So please, Justice, if you could turn on your camera. Justice is Assistant Professor of STEM Education at the University of Texas, El Paso. Justice, take it away.
Thank you. Greetings from the University of Texas at El Paso, or UTEP. As Vina pointed out, my name is Justice, and it's my great honor to present the next award. The Outstanding Science Prize is awarded to the team that designs and executes outstanding scientific experiments or exhibits mastery of scientific techniques. These students not only obtain an adept understanding of systems and structures and a scientific framework, but also consider the ethics and reproducibility of their work. From requisite background conceptual knowledge to well-developed argumentation on applications, judges vacillated comparatively very little about the award and fit. It is thus my great pleasure to name the 2022 Outstanding Science Prize winner, Tonji University, for their project, Power Mutualism. The team reimagines human relationships with the environment and life as they propose the use of cyanobacteria in wearables that are powered by photosynthesis and that harvest moisture from the human body. Congratulations to you all.
Congrats.
Yay.
Yes.
Congratulations, Tonji.
Thank you, Justice.
I'd like to welcome interdisciplinary artist Laura Splan to present our Outstanding Social Critique Prize.
Thank you, Jessica. As an artist who critically engages with the interconnectedness of cultural and biomedical systems, I'm very honored to present the Outstanding Social Critique Prize today. This award is a crucial part of the competition in that it recognizes the impact of biotechnologies on our everyday lives and the values embedded in the processes of creating them. This year, there were so many powerful socially engaged projects that considered the difficult realities of the present while imagining a better future through biodesign. The Outstanding Social Critique Prize is awarded to the team that best explores and most clearly communicates a criticism of biotechnology through a social lens. The team's project addresses the positive and negative effects of a technology or system on users and non-users, potential societal reactions to these effects, and ways to mitigate negative ones. It is my great pleasure to present the 2022 Outstanding Social Critique Prize to Robeson High School, Alla Future, and Firsthand for their project Cystassist Biodoula Services. Cystassist is a speculative community-supported doula service that includes mRNA biotherapies created in response to disproportionate maternal mortality rates among African American women. The judges were impressed by how this team looked ahead to the future while recognizing mistakes of the past and leveraging the wisdom of ancestors. Their project considered a number of critical issues in healthcare in the age of biotechnology, including systemic racism, bioethics, genetic privacy, bodily autonomy, and self-determination. For a unique combination of ancient healthcare traditions and modern biotechnology, their project prioritizes community building and trust to create a generative support system and complex network invested in the healthcare of Black women. Congratulations to the entire SysAssist team.
Congratulations, team.
Amazing. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Robeson and Al, future firsthand students. All right, the moment is here. We're going to move into announcing runner-up and overall winners. So this year we had 55 classrooms from 18 countries participate. It's a truly international competition. Every team did wonderfully. Unfortunately, we have to choose just two for runner-up and overall. All right, I'm going to get to it. Okay, our BDC 2022 runner-up is Mosquitoes and Lemons, California College of the Arts Design. Congratulations. All right.
Thank you, Alex. Oh my gosh, we're at the overall prize winner, the winner of the glass microbe. I'm going to pull it out of its case and try not to drop it in front of all of you. Here it is.
In all its glory.
This year, the winner of the glass microbe is going back to someplace where it's already been. It's going to Uni Andes for the project Musco. Here it is. Congratulations, team.
Yay, congratulations.
Woo. What an incredible year we've been through. This is my moment to gush. So I think I'm going to gush. First, I'm going to gush about our production crew. Jeff and Mark, who were behind the scenes, ran this flawlessly. And we are deeply, deeply appreciative of all the time and effort they put in, sleepless nights, and so on. And now I get to gush over the team that I'm on stage with, which is always my favorite thing to do because it makes them so uncomfortable. Vina, Alex, Jess, who's new to us. Honestly, this event is always so special because all of the love and effort that you put into this event and into the entire year. BDC this year is bigger than it's ever been. That means it's more work than it's ever been. I think we all feel that, but I also think that we all feel that it's really worth it. And giving awards and seeing the students and getting to work with the judges and the instructors, and of course, yes, the students as well. I think it makes it all worth it. So I just want to thank the three of you. I want to thank the students wherever you are around the world. I want to thank your instructors for really going above and beyond every single year, well beyond the semester often. And of course, I want to thank the judges who hotly debate every one of these projects. And of course, the sponsors who basically make this all possible. So thank you all. Next year, fingers crossed, in person at MoMA. But for now, let's just clap our way out. Thank you, everyone.
And congrats to you, Dan. We wouldn't be here without you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.